Chapter 5:13. Just then, Fang Xingjian spoke again. Third uncle, do you guys want to live? If you're willing to mend your ways, turn over a new leaf, apologize to me, and even convince Li Shuanghua to lower her head, I can consider letting you guys live. Fang Yueming's gaze instantly changed, and a strong hint of hesitation appeared on his face. Although he would no longer have extraordinary powers and authority, it would still be good to be able to live. Furthermore, with the despot and the thunder monarch as examples, he was truly shocked. However, Hua Mimi could not care less. She pulled Fang Yueming down and knelt down, saying, "Xingjian, your talent is world-shaking. Right now, you've even shaken the entire world with just you and your sword. We were the ones who were short-sighted and failed to recognize Mount Tai. We were the ones who looked down on you. Please be magnanimous and let us off this time. From today onward, we'll definitely forsake the darkness for the light and support you with all our might." The Fang clan's third son, Fang Yueming, said furiously, "What are you saying? Are you crazy? You might be shameless, but I'm not." Hua Mimi also cried out, "Fang Yueming, you good for nothing. I've had 8 lifetimes of bad luck to have married you. You've been listening to your mother all your life, revolving around her. Is she your wife, or am I your wife? This old woman has gone crazy and wants to die. Don't drag me down with you." "You." Fang Yueming looked at his wife as if he was looking at a stranger. Hua Mimi dragged him down his knees and cried out, "Fang Yueming, can't you be a man for once? Even Lord Thunder Monarch and Lord Despot have given in. Do you still want me to die with you and your mother?" Fang Yueming's countenance kept on changing. In fact, he was a profligate son to begin with and was very afraid of death. However, he had been unable to put down his pride when facing Fang Xingjian. However, after the Thunder Monarch, Despot, and his own wife had given in, he could no longer hold on. Fang Yueming looked at Li Shuanghua and said, "Mother, the situation is really hopeless now. Why don't you just admit your mistake? Moreover, Xingjian is a member of our Fang clan. If you can admit your mistake and join forces with him, our Fang clan will be the strongest clan on earth. Haven't you always wanted to revitalize the Fang clan?" "Shut up." Li Shuanghua's eyes suddenly widened, and an unprecedented rage was reflected in her eyes. It should be said that even when Li Shuanghua had been defeated by Fang Xingjian and her cultivation had been sealed, such fury had not appeared in her eyes. However, now that her youngest son, whom she doted on the most, was advising her to admit defeat, her will was filled with fury. Li Shuanghua glared at Fang Yueming and said, "Unfilial son, are you also going to side with that vile spawn, Fang Xingjian, and rebel against our Fang clan? He threatened you, so you should die to prove your loyalty. Even if you die, you won't accept his threat." Hua Mimi shouted from the side, "Mom, Yueming is your son. If you really dote on him, then apologize to Xingjian. Do you really want to see your own son die?" "Shut up. B*TCH. Li Shuanghua immediately wanted to stand up and dash up to beat Hua Mimi to death. However, her physical body was as weak as an ordinary person's. With just a single thought from Fang Xingjian, she stopped her actions, rendering her unable to move. However, looking at this scene, she still felt exhilarated, and the circulation of her mental cultivation method became increasingly smooth. It was as if all the negative emotions in her heart had been swept away. B*TCH, from today onward, you've been expelled from the Fang clan. You're no longer a member of the Fang clan. When I break free, the first thing I'll do is to kill you with my palm." The Fang clan's second son, Fang Yuehe, shook his head. "Mother, are you still thinking of breaking free even now?" He had long been disappointed with his mother's partiality and stubbornness. Right now, he pointed to his third son and his wife and said, "Mother, do you know that your management of the Fang clan has been a failure? In the process of us taking over the Fang clan, we didn't encounter any resistance at all. Everyone has long since refused to submit to your rule. It's just that you've been forcefully suppressing them. Look, even your third son, whom you dote on the most, wants to rebel against you. Right now, you're completely isolated. Do you still not understand whether what you've been doing all these years was right or wrong? Every single muscle in Li Shuanghua's body tensed up, and the will in her mind surged crazily. Even though she was in so much pain that her face was contorted, she was still crazily urging her powers, wanting to break free from Feng Xingjian's restrictions. Unfilial son, do you really think that you've gained the upper hand? As long as you don't kill me, there'll be a day when I break free, suppress all of you, and reform the Feng clan. Feng Xingjian looked at the savage Li Shuanghua and felt extremely exhilarated. His mental cultivation method circulated increasingly faster, and his proficiency in it increased rapidly. He was showing signs of achieving a breakthrough again. Take them away. At the side, Fang Yueming and Hua Mimi were brought away by the guards. At this moment, both of them were really anxious. Seeing that they were being dragged away by the guards, Fang Yueming shouted anxiously, Xingjian, don't kill me. I beg of you. As long as you're willing to let me off, I'll definitely make that old hag lower her head. Right now, she's a cripple. If you let me torture her every day and feed her shit, she'll definitely give in. Hua Mimi also shouted crazily, Li Shuanghua, you damned old hag. Are you really going to watch as your son and daughter-in-law die? You damned old hag. Hurry up and kowtow to Feng Xingjian and apologize. Feng Xingjian smiled at Li Shuanghua. Li Shuanghua, you're really a failure as a person. You can't even discipline your own son. However, Li Shuanghua seemed to have completely calmed down. She said calmly, I'll just take it that these unfilial sons and daughters have never existed. As for my martial will, even if you kill me, you can forget about making me submit to you. Of course, I won't kill you so easily. Only by making you submit completely and lower your head will it be considered a victory for me. With that, she suddenly waved her hand and got the guards to keep Fang Yueming and Hua Mimi behind. She said, since you're so stubborn and refuse to admit your mistakes, I can only use violence to make you submit. With that, Feng Xingjian brought Li Shuanghua, his second son Feng Yuehe, his third son Feng Yueming, and Hua Mimi to the Feng clan's mourning hall. Looking at the many memorial tablets in the mourning hall, Feng Xingjian said calmly, over 2 years ago, it was here that you used violence to force me to kneel, threatening me to give up my freedom and become Feng Xingqian's slave for life. Li Shuanghua, how do you think my current achievements are compared to Feng Xingqian's? Seeing that Li Shuanghua did not say anything, Feng Xingjian said calmly, my current talent and cultivation are more than 10,000 times stronger than Feng Xingqian's. Li Shuanghua, these sons and grandsons that you've nurtured are just a bunch of trash when compared to me. Do you still not understand? 2 years ago, you used violence to force me. Today, I'll use violence to make you repent and atone for your sins. As he spoke, Feng Xingjian waved his hand, and the air flowed as he pushed Li Shuanghua to the memorial tablet of Feng Xingjian's mother, Feng Yueru. Li Shuanghua, today, you'll kneel down and admit your mistakes to my mother, repent and atone for your sins. At the sight of this, Li Shuanghua finally could not hold it in any longer and spoke up, be *starred. You want me to kneel down to this unfilial daughter? Can your mother afford to accept this? Aren't you afraid that she'll die from anger in the netherworld? Chapter 514. Feng Xingjian shook his head. Stubborn. As Feng Xingjian spoke, he slapped down with his palm. His pure physical strength compressed the air like an invisible palm, pressing Li Shuanghua down to her knees. Li Shuanghua dropped to her knees with a bang, and her face turned into the color of a pig's liver. Hints of green light kept on emitting from her body, as if wanting to break through the restrictions. Seeing her in this state, Feng Xingjian let out a cold laugh. With a flick of his wrist, Tyrant pounced out and encompassed her body. Streams of green light seeped into Li Shuanghua's body, ceaselessly engulfing her physical tissues. You be *starred. Li Shuanghua felt that her body was being engulfed incessantly. Tyrant had just engulfed the body of a divine-level expert. Although the despot was seriously injured and could not use any of his powers, his physical attributes were still there. After eating it, Tyron would be a great tonic. Under Tyron's engulfment, Li Shuanghua's martial will kept on turning into her physical body to make up for the damage. Her martial will started to dissipate rapidly, and panic finally appeared in her eyes. Do you think that I don't know that you've been accumulating power, wanting to break through my sword intent? Today, I'll completely take away your cultivation so that you can peacefully atone for your sins to my mother every day. As he spoke, Fang Xingjian tapped out across space with a finger, and another stream of sword intent slashed down. This time around, Li Shuanghua felt that she had completely lost the ability to control her martial will. Her martial will was like a great river that kept on flowing into her physical body, ceaselessly making up for the damage to her physical tissues. However, her physical body continued to be engulfed and absorbed by Tyrant. This meant that the power of her martial will was ceaselessly dissipating. In the blink of an eye, her martial will dissipated rapidly, becoming increasingly lesser. In the end, it was even weaker than ordinary people, and her physical body had deteriorated to the point that it was like an 80-year-old old man. At this moment, even if Fang Xingjian were to remove the sword intent restrictions he had left on her, Li Shuanghua would still have to cultivate anew in order to recover her cultivation. At the next moment, Tyron retreated. He had absorbed a tremendous amount of flesh and blood from 2 divine-level experts consecutively. Although the physical bodies of Magic Prince warriors were far from that of knights, they were still a great supplement for him. Fang Xingjian tapped out 3 times consecutively, once again leaving behind 3 streams of sword intent in Li Shuanghua's body. If any martial will were to appear, it would be scattered by these 3 gushes of sword intent. From now on, Li Shuanghua's cultivation base was completely lost, and she was no different from an ordinary old woman. At this moment, Li Shuanghua, who was kneeling on the ground, seemed to have aged 30 years in an instant. Fang Xingjian said to Fang Yueming and Hua Mimi, "Aren't the 2 of you going to help her kowtow and apologize?" "Yes, yes." Fang Yueming nodded and bowed, saying, "Leave it to us." As he spoke, Fang Yueming had already pressed down on Li Shuanghua's left and right sides, starting to make her kneel down and kowtow. Fang Yueming shouted, "Xingjian, don't worry. From now on, leave this old lady to us. We'll guarantee that she'll sincerely kowtow and apologize to eldest sister every day, morning, afternoon, and night." Li Shuanghua was so angry that her body was trembling, and hints of tears finally trickled down from the corners of her eyes. At this moment, she had lost all of her power, her martial will was shattered, and she was even forced to kneel down to her deceased eldest daughter by her youngest son, whom she doted on the most. In this instant, Li Shuanghua's worldview finally collapsed completely. Her eyes were filled with nothing but despair. She looked at Fang Yueru, who was on the memorial tablet, and laughed bitterly. "Fang Yueru, you unfilial daughter. You really have a good son. My son can't be compared to your son. I've lost." Fang Xingjian shook his head and left the Fang clan's old manor. Behind him, Hua Mimi slapped Li Shuanghua's face and pressed down on her head, smashing it against the ground. "Damned old woman, what are you shouting for? Quickly admit your mistake and apologize." Over the next few days, Fang Yueming and Hua Mimi pressed Li Shuanghua to the ground to kowtow and apologize every day. Faced with Li Shuanghua's disobedience, Fang Yueming and Hua Mimi would beat and scold her at every turn. Right now, they had already vented all of their resentment onto Li Shuanghua. Even when Li Shuanghua went on a hunger strike, they would pry open her mouth and force everything down her throat. This was especially when Fang Xingjian was still in Demonic City. Fang Yueming and Hua Mimi seemed to be afraid that they would be killed by Fang Xingjian if they were to slack off. Thus, they forced Li Shuanghua to do whatever she wanted day and night. Even the servants would mock, glare, and mock Li Shuanghua. It was because Li Shuanghua had too many rules in the clan, and she would often be punished with the clan's rules. She had even beaten or injured many maids and maids. Countless people secretly hated her. Now that her cultivation had been crippled, it had not been a big deal at the start. However, after 1 or 2 days, there were already people who started to kick her when she was down. There were even people who were not part of the Fang clan who secretly came to the Fang clan's morning hall to observe Li Shuanghua's pathetic state of being old and unable to put up any resistance. It had only been a few days, but Li Shuanghua felt that it had been longer than her entire life. Wave after wave of humiliation, the feeling of falling from the highest peak to the lowest valley, caused the despair in her eyes to grow increasingly stronger, and she sank into the lowest valley of her life. One night, while Fang Yueming and Huang Mimi were fast asleep, Li Shuanghua took a long cloth and walked under the eaves. Behind her, Fang Xingjian stood in the shadows, not saying a single word. The next morning, Fang Yueming came to the top floor of the building and reported, "Xingjian, Li Shuanghua committed suicide by hanging herself yesterday." Fang Xingjian said calmly, "Give her a proper burial." Also, as a divine-level expert of this generation, there's a need for a few of them to accompany her in death. Fang Yueming's countenance changed. "You're saying Fang Yuehe and Huang Mimi have committed all sorts of evil deeds. I won't be able to feel at ease with them around. I understand now." At this moment, the matter with the Fang clan was completely settled. Fang Xingjian felt that his mind was in a state of tranquility. His mental cultivation method circulated at an extreme speed, and silver light burst out in his mind. At this moment, his universal sword dominance lunisolar mental cultivation method had finally reached level 10. At the next moment, Fang Xingjian opened his eyes, and there seemed to be silver light bursting out from them. He said calmly to Fang Yueming, "Prepare to start the nuclear explosion experiment." During this period of time, when Fang Xingjian was dealing with the matters on Earth, a tremendous change happened in Miracle World. March 1st, 12 o'clock at night. In Miracle World's night sky, a myriad of starlight lit up simultaneously for an entire night before disappearing once again. In a valley in the north of the empire, the first prince looked at the starlight in the sky and laughed out loud. The Milky Way is rising, and the world is going through a metamorphosis. As expected, I didn't miscalculate. Today is a good day for me to attain a breakthrough to the divine level. Both inside and outside the valley, countless experts dropped to their knees. Streams of auras soared into the sky, turning all the animals and bugs within a range of 100 lis into dust. At the next moment, shouts that were like mountains and tsunamis gushed out. "May your highness lead a long life and unify the human world. May your highness lead a long life and unify the human world. May your highness lead a long life and unify the human world." The first prince's eyes were tightly shut, and streams of aura that were like sulfur from hell extended out from his body, seeming to gradually materialize. As the seventh onslaught gets closer and closer, the world's metamorphosis has finally arrived. The path forward has been opened, and a turbulent era is about to begin. Countless experts, heroes, and sovereigns will be born. The first prince broke into an excited smile, and streams of flames that represented his ambition burned in his eyes. And the truth will prove that I'm the strongest. Chapter 515. On the west coast of Miracle World, in the capital of the Uranless Federation, where the headquarters of the Mage Association was located, Phantom City. At the very center of the city, all the buildings were encompassed in a thin layer of fog. Unlike the Sky City in the Empire's capital, the Phantom City of the Mage Association was said to have been moved to an alternate dimension. Although one could see and hear it, without permission, one would never be able to enter. The tallest tower in the center of Phantom City, which was 1,000 meters tall, was the magic tower of the Mage Association's #1 expert, the Black Mage King. Right now, Fang Xingqian, who belonged to the third generation of the Fang clan, was kneeling on the ground. This person, who had been tested to have the talent to become a red-robed mage, had become the Black Mage King's disciple, and had been cultivating in Phantom City for the past 2 years. Fang Xingqian, who was only 6 years old, had already grown to the size of a 13 or 14-year-old child. He was 5 meters tall, and his entire body was covered in muscles. His face was mature and resolute, and it was impossible to tell that he was only 6 years old. Moreover, there were two small bumps on his forehead, as if there was something brewing in them. It was clear that he had made great progress in cultivating the red-robed faction's black magic over the past 2 years. Right now, he was kneeling on the ground, his eyes flashing with deep-rooted hatred. Master, my parents and grandmother were all forced to their deaths by that be-asterisk-starred Fang Xingjian. Please take action once and kill Fang Xingjian to avenge me. Before Fang Xingqian was an elderly man with a withered body who looked like a skeleton. The elderly man was sitting on a rocking chair, swaying back and forth as the chair swayed. Hearing Fang Xingqian's words, the elderly man said slowly, "Xingqian, I won't take action for something like this. It's just a mere Fang Xingjian, a good-for-nothing who hasn't even reached the divine level, and yet you want me to take action? What a fool. If word of this gets out, others will laugh at you. The most important thing when you're out in the world is your reputation. Without your reputation, you won't be able to have a strong will, and you won't even be able to cultivate." Fang Xingqian lifted his head, a little unconvinced, and said, "But..." The Black Mage King frowned, patted the chair, and said, "Isn't it just your parents who died? When I came out at the age of 10, my entire family was drowned by my enemies and fed to the fish. Aren't they still fine now? If you want to take revenge, you should cultivate yourself. After a few years, you'll have to force that bastard to eat shit. That's the rule." Fang Xingqian lowered his head with a grim expression, clearly dissatisfied with this outcome. Just then, a gray mist slowly floated in from the window, forming a vague human figure. The Black Mage King's eyes slanted slightly, and the centipede-like scar on his face appeared increasingly savage. "Grey Worm? You're not dead? You dare to come here? Aren't you afraid that Madman Ian will chop you to death?" The person who had just arrived was one of the top characters among the gray-robed mages, the Terrene Shrine's upper echelon, the gray-robed Mage Worm King. Hearing the Black Mage King's words, the gray fog trembled a little and turned into an extremely ugly big worm. It grinned and said, "Old man, it's been many years since we last met, but you're still as ugly as ever. You're probably the person that Silver Lunatic wants to kill the most right now. He doesn't have the time to bother me. The world's metamorphosis has come, and the density of ether particles will increase by 1,000 or even 10,000 times. The speed of cultivation will get increasingly faster, and the true path after the divine level will be opened up soon. I wonder how many experts will appear from the Church of Universal Truth this time around. You came here to tell me this." The Black Mage King smiled coldly and said, "When has our Mage Association ever been afraid of them? What are you doing here? If you don't tell me, I'll squash you to death." The incarnation of the Worm King smiled and said, "Fang Xingjian, this guy is from Earth, right? He killed quite a few of our men. I'm here to ask if he's related to you." Hearing the words Fang Xingjian, a gleam flashed in Fang Xingqian's eyes. The Black Mage King shook his head and said, "You want to touch him? He's not one of us. He came from Earth on his own. I think he's a hybrid of an Earthling and a miracle person. He has the body of a miracle person and has also cultivated the Empire's Path of Knights." Grey Worm broke into a satisfied smile. "I understand. Then we don't have to hold back anymore." The Black Mage King said in disdain, "He's in Demonic City now. You gray-robed mages are useless without diabolic energy. If you go to Demonic City, be careful not to be beaten to death by him." "Humph, there's no need for you to say that. We naturally have our ways." Then scram. Heading north from Miracle World, past the Plains Steel Lion Kingdom, past the Marxell Papal Kingdom, where the headquarters of the Holy See of Truth was located, they arrived at the northernmost part of Miracle World, arriving at the country of Frost, Manger. It was different from the Empire's ruling structure, from the cities, to the regions, to the royal family. It was different from the Mage Association's federation system. It was different from the plain style of the Steel Lion Kingdom. It was also different from the Sand Country's slavery system. It was also different from the Papal State's religious system. Manger, this country amidst the frost, still had the structure of many primitive tribes. The leader of all the tribes was known as the King of Manger. This generation's King of Manger was the Frostwolf tribe's Hellwolf Zax. Right now, in the Frostwolf tribe, a silver-haired man was lying next to a bonfire, looking at the roasted meat on the bonfire silently. The silver-haired man looked to be in his 30s or 40s. He had smooth skin, a slender and powerful figure, and his eyes revealed endless vicissitudes of life. Next to him, the strongest expert in Manger, this generation's king of Manger, the Hell Wolf Zax, who had stepped into the divine level for over 20 years, was kneeling on the ground, roasting the meat for the silver-haired man. His expression was one of unprecedented respect. Suddenly, the tent was opened, and a young man with short silver hair walked in. As he entered, a bloody stench came gushing out. It was as if the stench had taken on a material form and was about to enter everyone's noses. Smelling this bloody stench, the Hell Wolf Zax almost broke down. He looked at the young man with short silver hair and said, "What have you done?" The young man with short silver hair did not look at him. Instead, he looked at the middle-aged man and said, "Master, kill all those who deserve to die." The middle-aged man nodded, and Zax became enraged. "Who are you guys? Who on earth are you guys? Why are you guys massacring our Frostwolf tribe?" Right now, the Hell Wolf Zax, who had once dominated the Ice Plains and was invincible, wore a look of despair and fury. He had been happily hunting with a few elders and priests when the two people before him had descended from the sky. The middle-aged man had not made a move, but the young man had attacked consecutively and defeated all of the Frostwolf tribe's elders and priests. As the strongest expert in the Ice Plains, he had not been able to take a single punch from the other party. Including him, there were a total of 3 divine-level experts and over 20 level 29 warriors. To think that they could not even take a single blow from the other party. Hearing the Hell Wolf Zax's cries, the silver-haired middle-aged man threw him a sideways glance and said, "When the Frostwolf tribe fights with other tribes, it's the law of the jungle. I don't care. However, 1 month ago, after you guys defeated the Shadow Wolf tribe, not only did you massacre our warriors, but you even raped women and children, burned pregnant women to death, tortured girls, dug out the babies in their wombs, and stabbed them to death. The entire Shadow Wolf tribe has turned into a living hell. This makes me very unhappy. This makes me very unhappy. If I don't kill you guys, I won't be able to sleep tonight." The silver-haired, middle-aged man shook his head. "You guys have no morals." Chapter 516. The barbarian king was stunned for a moment. He had not expected that the other party would come looking for him because of something like this. Just for this? Just for something like this? You've killed many of our Frostwolf tribe's elders and priests. You want to wipe out our tribe? The middle-aged man shook his head and said, "All the people who attacked the Shadow Wolf tribe are dead. We didn't kill the rest. Of course, if other tribes were to abuse you, we wouldn't just stand by and watch." However, the barbarian king was no longer listening to what the other party was saying. The barbarian king let out a furious bellow, and a huge wolf phantom image rose up from his back. This was the wolf of disaster that had been passed down through the generations in the Frostwolf tribe, condensed from martial will. With the barbarian king's cultivation, this wolf of disaster that had been condensed from martial will could cause earthquakes, tempests, tsunamis, and even volcanic eruptions. When he attacked at full power, he could even contaminate his opponent's martial will and whittle away at his opponent's abilities. The barbarian king had once defeated over 100 second transition experts with a single howl from the wolf of disaster. He had even used the aura of disaster to whittle away the will of a second-tier demigod, causing his cultivation to drop to level 20. Even amongst the many divine-level experts in the Ice Plains, the barbarian king and his wolf of disaster were the best. The phantom image of the wolf of disaster let out a furious bellow and pounced toward the silver-haired middle-aged man with an endless aura of disaster. Before its body arrived, the strong gales it brought with it had already blown the entire tent away. The ground started to quake. Tornadoes appeared in the sky. The area within a range of 100 leagues was filled with lightning storms. There were even cracks in the ground that spewed out streams of lava. Waves of calamities descended, and unstoppable will gushed out from the depths of despair. However, faced with the barbarian king's desperate attack, the silver-haired middle-aged man merely pouted and spat out a mouthful of saliva. His saliva shot out at lightning speed, dispersing the wolf of disaster's body and smashing the barbarian king's physical body. It flew out for several tens of kilometers and crushed a mountain in the distance. The martial will contained in the saliva crushed the barbarian king's will, killing this divine-level expert completely. The tempest stopped, and the ground stopped trembling. However, the silver-haired middle-aged man wiped the corner of his mouth as if he had just killed an ant. However, he suddenly stood up, lifted his head, and looked in the southwest direction with slight puzzlement. The short-haired youth asked curiously, "What's wrong, master?" The silver-haired middle-aged man's lips curled into a smile. Someone's mental cultivation method has reached level 10. The short-haired youth said doubtfully, "Isn't our lineage's mental cultivation method always passed down from generation to generation, with only one person in each generation? Why is there another person?" The silver-haired middle-aged man's eyes were filled with doubt, followed by confusion. In the end, he smiled and shook his head. "Interesting. He was supposed to be your disciple, but someone messed with him. Now he's going to surpass you." Then what should we do?" The short-haired youth asked. "What else can we do? When he comes to the ice plains, you two just have a fight. Whoever wins will be the master." "Then what if he doesn't want to? Our bloodline has always convinced people with virtue. You just have to beat him until he's convinced." "But we still have to wait for him here." The short-haired young man was vexed. "Can't we go over?" The silver-haired middle-aged man shook his head, a look of nostalgia flashing in his eyes. "I promise someone, unless he dies, I won't be able to step out of the ice fields for the rest of my life." Elsewhere, as Miracle World was going through all sorts of changes, Feng Xingjian had also started his cultivation on Earth. In the desert in the northwest of Xian country, Feng Xingjian stood alone several tens of kilometers in the sky, looking down at the circular land. The Feng clan's matter has finally come to an end. Next, it's time for Miracle World. The first prince's matter has to be settled, and I also want to wipe out the Serene shrine. And he then thought of his mother's corpse, which had been taken away by the black-clothed man. Although he felt a little anxious, he felt that the black-clothed man did not harbor any ill intentions toward him. Moreover, regardless of whether it was the first prince, the Serene shrine, or the unfathomable black-clothed man, he would need to be extremely powerful before he could come into contact with them and deal with them. Right now, the most important thing was to cultivate. I'll first cultivate my physical particles to perfection through the nuclear explosions. In Xian country's command base, Feng Yuehe, Tyrant, and a few other generals from Xian country and the Federation were gathered together. They looked at Feng Xingjian on the screen with different expressions. Plan 312 has officially begun. The first nuclear explosion has begun. Warhead with a yield of 500,000 tons has been loaded. Preparations for Southwind 41 have been completed. Feng Yuehe watched as the intercontinental missile was being prepared step by step. There was still a hint of worry on his face. After all, Feng Xingjian had now become the Feng clan's greatest pillar of support. Although many of the clans in the Federation seemed to have submitted to him, there were still many people who were secretly restless. One could imagine that if Feng Xingjian were to make the slightest mistake, countless hungry wolves would pounce out and devour the entire Feng clan. He could not understand why Feng Xingjian would want to carry out a nuclear experiment. It would be fine if there was no danger, but if there were to be any injuries, it would be terrible. At the next moment, the intercontinental missile rose into the air, piercing through the clouds at a speed of Mach 2 and smashing toward Feng Xingjian. Just as it was about to collide with Feng Xingjian, the nuclear missile exploded. A nuclear missile with a yield of 500,000 tons was naturally a far cry from one with a yield of 50 million tons. However, the shock waves, heat energy, and light radiation that were unleashed in that instant were still terrifying. This was especially so for the high temperature and high pressure in the center. It was sufficient to turn all matter in human civilization into dust. However, Fang Xingjian's body's toughness had reached the level of a level 29 divine weapon, and he was also protected by the heavenly abyss annihilation armor. In times of danger, he could even perform the sword of infiltrating void and hide in spatial gaps. Therefore, he was not afraid of the nuclear missile's attack at all. Compared to the destructive prowess of the nuclear missile, he was more concerned about the stimulation that the various radiations from the nuclear missile would have on the physical particles in his body. Under the impact of the violent energy, Fang Xingjian could sense countless radiations and particle currents colliding against the physical particles in his body. Under such stimulation, the physical particles in his body started to wake up, lighting up like many candles. After about 1/10 of a second, Fang Xingjian felt that his physical body had reached its limits and was about to break down. Therefore, he performed the sword of infiltrating void and stepped into spatial gaps, once again comprehending the changes to the physical particles in his body. After a total of 20 minutes, an explosive bellow rang out 10,000 meters up in the sky. The mushroom cloud from the explosion was completely blown away, revealing Fang Xingjian's unscathed body. With just this explosion, Fang Xingjian could sense that 200 of the physical particles in his body had awakened. Although the prowess of a nuclear missile with a yield of 500,000 tons was a far cry from that of a nuclear missile with a yield of 50 million tons, what Fang Xingjian needed was not high temperature and pressure. What he needed was nuclear radiation. Nuclear radiation with a yield of 500,000 tons would allow him to be enveloped in it for a longer period of time. Therefore, a nuclear missile with a yield of 500,000 tons was more suitable for him, and the effects were also better. Waves of majestic energy burst out from the physical particles, filling up both inside and outside of his body. They formed streams of electricity that moved around his body. Nuclear missiles contain the profoundness of the microscopic world, and physical particles are also things in the microscopic domain of Miracle World. It's because I've inherited Miracle World's bloodline and possess the human body structure of Miracle World that my body is formed from 1.08 billion physical particles. Nuclear explosions release the power of the microscopic world. However, such explosions can also stimulate the eruption of physical particles. It's like splitting the world apart, opening up the small world of the physical particles in my body. There's no problem. As long as I use the sword of infiltrating void to prevent myself from getting injured during each explosion, I'll be able to cultivate through nuclear explosions and stimulate all 1.08 billion physical particles. Not only that, but a nuclear explosion with a yield of 500,000 tons would be easier for Fang Xingjian to control. It would be easier for him to control it, and it would also be less likely to affect the environment and magnetic fields, destroy electronic devices, and cause social unrest. Chapter 517. A series of thoughts flashed through Fang Xingjian's mind. In the next moment, he opened his eyes and made an OK gesture towards the sky. Seeing this from the satellite's detection, Fang Yue nodded and said, "Let's continue. Launch another nuclear missile with a yield of 500,000 tons." Just like that, Fang Xingjian endured the bombardment of the nuclear bombs time and time again. More and more of the physical particles in his body were stimulated, and the energy in his body skyrocketed like a tsunami. In fact, due to the increasing amount of energy erupting from the physical particles, he was not used to it all of a sudden. This caused his entire body to continuously erupt with waves of light radiation, forming rings of light halos. In the beginning, many families had observed Fang Xingjian's nuclear experiment. When they learned that Fang Xingjian had used a nuclear warhead with a yield of 500,000 tons, they didn't take it seriously. After all, Li Shuanghua had been able to resist a 50 megaton nuclear bomb before, so what could a 500,000 megaton nuclear bomb do? However, as they watched Fang Xingjian launch the nuclear bombs one after another and come out unscathed each time, all the clans started to be shocked. After a day and a night, thousands of nuclear warheads exploded on Fang Xingjian's body. All the observing families were shocked. At this moment, the nuclear explosion stopped. It was not because Fang Xingjian could not take it anymore, but because the large amount of nuclear radiation and particle flow had caused serious damage to the ground, causing a large number of electronic devices to be damaged. There were simply too many nuclear bombs exploding. Even though Feng Xingjian was tens of kilometers up in the sky, he was still affected. Therefore, Feng Xingjian changed his method. Anyway, as long as there was nuclear radiation, it could stimulate the physical particles in his body. Therefore, he went directly to the largest nuclear power plant today. Without wearing any protective clothing, he walked directly to the reactor. In order to further receive the impact of the nuclear reaction, he performed the infiltrating void sword and walked into the nuclear reactor, personally starting to experience the fission chain reaction. The flow of particles bombarded Feng Xingjian's body in a frenzy. Physical particles awakened one after another, bursting forth with waves of energy. As the amount of energy that could be used in his body increased, Feng Xingjian's sword art's prowess grew stronger even though his physical body did not improve much. Among the 5 great perfection realms, the strength of one's body determined one's defense. Specialty seeds determined physical strength. The reorganization of the brain determined the body's recovery ability, the brain's calculation ability, and the strength of one's will. The ether organs determined one's acceptance of ether particles' information and energy, as well as energy recovery ability and insight. The number of physical particles determined the power of the skill. The more physical particles he activated, the more energy he stored, and the more powerful his skills would be. The greater the degree of perfection, the better the development of the human body. When the time came for them to strive for the divine level, the more powerful their powers would be after their consciousness had materialized. Now that he had more energy to propel his sword techniques, the prowess of Feng Xingjian's 5 god-slaying swords became even stronger. The sword of infiltrating void could enter a wider range of spatial gaps, and its speed was also faster. With the light pursuit sword ripples, Feng Xingjian could now unleash 9 million light pursuit sword ripples at one go. With the all-conquering sword, Feng Xingjian could now open up a valley that was over 10 kilometers wide with a single sword attack. He could also destroy a nuclear missile with a yield of 500,000 tons with a single sword attack. With the instant sword, the range it could unleash had broken through 100 meters, reaching 120 meters. However, Feng Xingjian was still not satisfied. He plunged headfirst into the reactor and did not come out. The physical particles in his body increased crazily at the speed of a rocket, and he would only come out to rest when his physical body could not take it anymore. 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, 1 million, 10 million. In just a single day, the number of physical particles that had awakened in Feng Xingjian's body had reached a total of 10 million. However, compared to the total of 1.08 billion physical particles, it was still far too little. Therefore, Feng Xingjian spent almost every single day immersed in the reactor. His physical body continued to receive impacts from various nuclear and light radiations, and his powers increased like a rocket. Later on, Feng Xingjian even dragged Tyrant into the reactor with him to condense physical particles through nuclear reactions. Tyrant was a demigod with 2 tiers of perfection to begin with, and he had even engulfed the corpses of 2 divine-level experts. Right now, his 5 attributes had all broken through 500 points. Although his martial will was many times weaker than Feng Xingjian's, his physical body was several tens of times stronger than Feng Xingjian's. Dashing into the nuclear reactor, with Feng Xingjian occasionally performing the infiltrating void to help, Feng Xingjian's cultivation increased at a rapid rate. Just like that, the 2 of them immersed themselves in the reactor for 3 months. 3 months later, Feng Yuehe, who had become the undisputed person in charge of the Feng clan and a top-notch character in the world, was now waiting obediently at the entrance of a nuclear power plant. Chapter 518. In the Feng clan's manor in Demonic City, chests after chests of gold were transported over and placed casually in the square, emitting a piercing glow under the sun. The surrounding guards looked at the overwhelming amount of gold bars in front of them, and everyone's eyes were filled with greed and yearning. However, no one dared to make a move. No one was foolish enough to do something like this before Feng Xingjian. Tyrant walked to and fro among the gold bars, continuously using the gates of the netherworld to absorb them. There were not as many heavenly and earthly treasures on Earth as in Miracle World, and technological products were basically useless in Miracle World. The only thing that Feng Xingjian could think of that would be useful to bring over from Earth was gold. After all, the Empire also had a gold standard system, and gold was valuable no matter where it was. Watching as Tyrant kept the chests of gold, Feng Xingjian took in a deep breath and asked, "The ether particle density has increased?" This was something he had discovered after coming out of seclusion. Ever since he had returned to Demonic City, Feng Xingjian had discovered that the ether particle density in the entire Demonic City had increased by several tens of times. This caused the ether particle density on Earth to keep on expanding. Feng Yue nodded and said, "That's right. According to the news from Miracle World, the entire Miracle World has been going through a metamorphosis since 3 months ago. The ether particle density has increased tremendously, and more diabolic energy has descended. Regardless of whether it's knights, magic prince warriors, or mages, their cultivation speed has gotten increasingly faster. To think that there's such a thing," Feng Xingjian thought. Could it be related to the 7th onslaught? Feng Xingjian asked, "Do you know about the 7th onslaught?" Feng Yuehe was stunned and asked, "What 7th onslaught?" Feng Xingjian shook his head and did not ask further. It was because there was no way for him to cultivate the path of knights. Moreover, Magic Prince belonged to the lineage of the evil gods and would be targeted by the Holy Sea of Truth. Therefore, for a long time, Earth did not have much information about Miracle World. Most of it came from the Mage Association. Thinking of the Mage Association, Feng Xingjian asked again, "Have the other 2 divine-level experts not appeared? What about the Mage Association?" Feng Yue has said, "They haven't appeared. It's as if they've disappeared. As for the Mage Association, they seem to have acted as if nothing had happened." But Xingqian sent someone over with a message. What? Feng Xingjian did not feel any enmity towards this younger brother of his. After all, when he was in the Feng clan, Feng Xingqian had only been 4 years old. There was no enmity between them. However, now that he had killed Feng Xingqian's parents, there was no way Feng Xingqian would let him off. It was also impossible for him to allow Feng Xingqian to act. Feng Xingqian would definitely not let him off. Feng Yuehe said, "Xingqian said that within 3 years, he'll personally come and settle the scores with you." Feng Xingjian did not take this matter to heart. With Feng Xingqian's age, even if he had cultivated for 3 years, there was no way he would be a match for him. He said, "I will leave Shanghai next, so I plan to leave a sword intent on you. Firstly, it can protect you. Secondly, if something happens to you, I will know at any time." Feng Yue has said, Of course. He hoped that Feng Xingjian would not leave. Only then would Demonic City and the Feng clan be free of worries. However, he also knew that Feng Xingjian's ambitions were not with the Feng clan, so it was impossible for him to persuade him. Therefore, he decided to give him his full support. Level 29 experts were able to turn their martial will into various incarnations and leave them on other people. As a demigod with 2 tiers of perfection, this was even more so for Feng Xingjian. Moreover, as the transmission speed of his martial will was close to light speed, he would be able to sense it the moment his sword intent was crushed. Feng Xingjian tapped Feng Yuehe's forehead with a finger, and an abnormally sharp sword intent gushed out, gushing into the depths of Feng Yuehe's consciousness. On the other side, Tyrant walked over and said, "The gates of the netherworld are filled with gold. Let's go." As he spoke, there was a hint of astonishment and agitation in his tone. The amount of gold that Feng Xingjian had allowed him to take with him today was over 500 tons. Feng Xingjian's wealth was comparable to that of countries. If this amount of gold was placed in Miracle World, it would be sufficient to cover the expenses of a country. It could be said that Feng Xingjian would no longer need to worry about money for his future cultivation. This was also because Feng Xingjian was unrivaled on Earth, and he was in control of the Feng clan, the tyrannical Onassis clan, and the Thunder Monarch's Ford clan. During this period of contact, Tyrant had also discovered the difference between Earth and Miracle World. The two of them were two different worlds. However, he did not have any objections to this. After all, the evil gods from beyond the heavens that he believed in were not from Miracle World to begin with. The few times that Miracle World had attacked, it had been against people from other worlds. The mages were very receptive to such situations. Feng Xingjian nodded. "Let's go." At the next moment, the two of them disappeared completely, leaving Feng Yuehe standing there in a daze. Eventually, he let out a long exhale. Have they left? This time around, the Federation has suffered a great blow and has approved the Magic Prince Warrior cloning plan. This time around, Feng Xingjian's appearance had completely trampled on the Earth's Federation's authority, and it had also made them realize the difference in martial prowess between Earth and Miracle World. Faced with this difference, the Magic Prince Warrior cloning plan, which had been stopped all this while, was fully activated. At the same time, the space colonization plan and the superhuman plan were also activated. The entire Earth was like a supermotor that was activated at full speed in order to catch up to the difference in martial prowess between Earth and Miracle World. Feng Yuehe had mentioned this to Feng Xingjian before, but the latter was not interested in it. However, Feng Yuehe himself had a clear understanding of the value involved. He understood that history had already moved toward a new turning point. After experiencing the pain of being cut deep, the Federation's upper echelon have a strong sense of danger. This time around, the one who came was Feng Xingjian. What if other divine-level experts were to come next time? The entire Earth's military prowess will probably increase rapidly in the next 10 years, or even several decades. And if the Feng clan wishes to continue being at the top, they'll have to lead the trend. It was not that Feng Yuehe wanted to deal with Feng Xingjian. It was just that after finding out about the changes in Earth's power structure, he wanted to get a share of the benefits and continue to maintain the Feng clan status. Just then, Feng Yuehe's cell phone rang. He picked it up and said, "Hello, this is Feng Yuehe." What? You mean the back of the moon? I understand now. I'll come over right away." Putting aside the developments on Earth, on the coast of Miracle World's western continent, two men who were emitting streams of white light and had long hair that burned like white flames suddenly appeared. Tyrant crossed his arms before his chest, took in a deep breath, and said, "It's true. The ether particle density is really high." With that, he raised his palm, and gray light burst out, turning into a huge light sphere. The density of diabolic energy has also increased. It's really too convenient to borrow powers from the gods beyond the heavens. Feng Xingjian said, "Is it because of the seventh onslaught?" "That should be the case." Just then, 9 figures suddenly dashed over from all directions, surrounding Feng Xingjian and Feng Xingjian. Tyrant stopped Feng Xingjian with one hand, smiled, and said, "Let me do it." Chapter 519. Tyrant looked at the 9 figures and suddenly smiled. "Strider, why did you come here?" The 9 figures surrounded Feng Xingjian and Feng Xingjian. They were 9 people who were dressed in gray robes and looked exactly the same. Hearing Tyrant's words, the 9 figures by the name of Strider spoke at the same time. "Tyrant, to think that you dare to betray Feng Xingjian?" Tyrant shrugged and communicated with Feng Xingjian through his will. "This guy is one of the 3 great geniuses that the Serene Shrine has been nurturing for the past 10 over years. In the past, his abilities were about the same as mine. His ability is to split and clone himself. However, the maximum number of clones he can create is only 10. There's also one who hides all year round to protect his life." Tyrant looked at Strider and said, "Don't talk about betrayal. We're all gray-robe mages. We believe in God and are loyal to ourselves. Right now, I have new ideas about the future and am no longer interested in the Serene Shrine." "But you're waiting here. Could it be that you're waiting for us?" Strider let out a cold snort and said, "I was only here to capture Feng Xingjian. I didn't expect to meet you, who has betrayed me. It doesn't matter. I'll just capture you together. It's a pity that 3 months ago, I might not have been a match for you guys. However, The world's metamorphosis has changed. 3 months have passed, and I've undergone a qualitative improvement compared to the past. Streams of gray light burst out from the 9 Striders' bodies at the same time. As the light soared, it was as if there were 9 gray suns in the sky. Looking at the gray-robed black magic that was about to be performed, Tyron smiled. A qualitative improvement? It's the same for me. The speed at which Strider performed magic was very fast. This was especially so when his 9 clones performed the magic at the same time. It increased the magic's effect and prowess. The gray-robed black magic focused on the powers and flesh of creatures from other worlds. A huge black hole suddenly appeared, and a massive figure that was several hundred meters tall slowly darted out from it. It was a giant 9-headed snake that was hundreds of meters tall and covered in scales from head to toe. Even when it was curled up, it was still hundreds of meters tall. Each of its heads was like a skyscraper. The giant snake in front of them weighed hundreds of thousands of tons. When they drilled out of the spatial door and fell into the sea, it was as if 10 aircraft carriers had fallen into the sea at the same time. Tens of thousands of tons of seawater splashed out and crashed into the sky, forming a heavy rain. At the same time, his 9 heads kept twisting and turning, letting out howls that shook 100 miles. Level 10 Black Magic Hydra. Strider did not seem to want to make his move immediately. Instead, he said slowly, 3 months ago, the Black Mage King was the only one in the entire world who could perform level 10 black magic. After 3 months of tough cultivation, I'm also able to perform level 10 black magic. This Hydra has an almost indestructible body. Its physical strength is enough to destroy a small island and lift up a city. Moreover, each of his heads controlled a different calamity force, allowing him to unleash 9 types of black magic from level 1 to level 9. Do you know that While Strider was still introducing, Tyron had already dashed up to one of the Hydra's heads. He wrapped his hands around its chin, and the power throughout his body burst out explosively. Piercing white light burst out from his body, as if white flames were burning on his body. How strong was Tyron's battle prowess right now? Even himself was not sure. One reason was that his physical foundation was that of a demigod with 2 tiers of perfection, and he had also engulfed the bodies of 2 divine-level experts consecutively. The more terrifying thing was that when he and Feng Xinjian had cultivated together with the help of nuclear radiation, they had stimulated 1.08 billion physical particles, which had never been seen before. Putting aside the prowess of his martial will, in terms of just his physical body and energy alone, he was even more terrifying than some divine-level experts. With this sudden outburst, overwhelming power immediately gushed out from his body. Waves of vital energy and blood energy burst out from his body, and the Hydra's chin became deformed. Its body, which weighed several 100,000 tons, flew up with a boom and was flung into the sky by Tyrant. Bang! However, although Tyron's strength was great, the area of effect was only limited to his arms. He had just flung the Hydra over 10 meters up when his hands abruptly loosened their grip. The Hydra's chin was completely torn off, and a large piece of flesh was torn off. Amidst agonizing cries, the Hydra, whose head was covered in blood, was still sent flying out a distance of several hundred meters due to the astonishing inertia. Strider's mouth was agape, as if he was looking at a deity descending to the mortal world. Tyrant clenched his hands in displeasure. Looking at the Hydra, which had once again plunged down toward the surface of the sea, Tyrant's lips twitched. Tisk, it's really heavy. As he spoke, he put out his palm and aimed it at the Hydra's position. For 3 consecutive months, he had been cultivating day and night amidst nuclear radiation, incessantly stimulating the powers of his physical particles. Not only did this allow Tyrant to possess an extremely abundant amount of energy, but it also allowed him to finally create his own martial technique based on the process of nuclear reactions, the God-perishing palm. This also meant that Tyrant had gradually broken free from the restraints of black magic and was starting to use his own powers to fight. At the next moment, scorching white light kept on surging out from Tyrant's palm. High temperatures and high pressures extended out wildly toward the place his palm was aimed at. In less than a second, the intense light and heat had completely encompassed the Hydra, turning it into a pillar of light that shot out toward the surface of the sea. The atmosphere was heated up, and the seawater was vaporized for a short period of time. The Hydra let out agonizing cries under the atmospheric pressure, which was several 100,000 times higher than normal. Streams of shock waves came pressing down, as if countless experts were attacking it. The even more terrifying thing was that Tyrant did not show any signs of stopping. As the energy in his body gushed out crazily, the light pillar continued to expand. In the blink of an eye, it continued to penetrate deep into the bottom of the sea, creating a series of continuous explosions under the surface of the sea. This went on for a total of 10 seconds before Tyrant slowly retracted his hand, and the scorching light in his palm gradually dissipated. However, when Feng Xingjian raised his head, there was no longer any Hydra. Swoosh, 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 swoosh sounds rang out, and Strider fled frantically in 9 different directions with a horrified expression. However, he saw Tyrant slowly lifting his finger and pointing toward the back of one of the clones. At the next moment, a nuclear attack was launched. A stream of particles emitted a crimson-red glow and shot out from Feng Xingjian's fingertip, vaporizing Strider, who had fled over 10 kilometers away. Feng Xingjian pointed 9 times consecutively, and 9 streams of crimson-red light pillars cut across the sky, hitting Strider's body so badly that not even dregs were left behind. Tyrant grinned. The Kurami seems to be a little too strong. However, Feng Xingjian looked at the surface of the sea under his feet and said calmly, "The god-perishing palm you performed earlier took too long. A great explosion has occurred at the bottom of the sea, and the great explosion is going to create a tsunami." "Huh, something like that will happen." Tyrant scratched his head and said, "Then what should we do?" Feng Xingjian put out his palm toward the bottom of the sea and said, "Let's try again." Chapter 520. In the depths of the sea, a huge army of over 100,000 people was swimming rapidly. All of them were monsters whose upper bodies were close to that of humans, but their lower bodies had fish tails. These monsters had pointy ears, and their eyes emitted a faint fluorescent light. Their teeth were extremely sharp like the tips of blades. However, what was even more astonishing was their swimming speed in the sea. Even though they were at a depth of over 10,000 meters, they were completely unaffected by the sea pressure. They could reach a speed of over 80 kilometers per hour, displaying terrifying physical attributes. What was even more astonishing were the prints on these monsters' bodies. Streams of purple prints kept on emitting a faint purple glow, containing hints of mysterious auras. At the very front of this underwater army was a murloc. However, this murloc was 10 times bigger than the others. If it was over 20 meters long, it had a total of 6 arms and wore a set of pitch-black armor. Under the armor were densely packed purple prints, and the aura it exuded was as deep as the ocean, as if it was the sovereign of the ocean. Finally, I finally succeeded. This man who looked like the legendary Murloc called himself the Sea God. He was the first batch of people to enter Miracle World from Earth, as well as the earliest batch of Magic Prince Knights. The purple Magic Prince that the Sea God cultivated were different from other Magic Prince. The purple Magic Prince grasped the abilities of reproduction, and self-replication. They could be as minor as the reproduction and recovery of one's body, or as major as the continuous replication and growth of one's energy. Right now, after over 10 years of tough cultivation, not only had the Sea God reached the divine level, but he had also given birth to millions of people at the bottom of the sea. He could continuously reproduce working matrices, warrior matrices, construction matrices, and so on. And these matrices could continuously reproduce tens of thousands of working murlocs, warrior murlocs, construction murlocs, and so on with themselves as the prototype. The 100,000-man army behind the Sea God was an army of murlocs that he had meticulously nurtured through self-replication and self-reproduction. Furthermore, the world had been changing over the past few months, and the strength of his people had increased rapidly. The army under him had a total of 100,000 people, and each of them had a battle prowess that was at least at the first transition. Among them, 10,000 had even reached the second transition or above. However, such development also caused him to deplete a large amount of the resources at the bottom of the Western Sea. The resources became increasingly harder to extract, and the speed of development became increasingly slower. As far as I know, this military power is already stronger than the Empire on the West Coast. The sea god judged inwardly. Next, as long as I kill my way on a land and kill along the way, I will obtain all sorts of experience and resources. With 10,000 level 29 Magic Prince warriors, 100,000 level 29 Magic Prince warriors, or even 1 million level 29 Magic Prince warriors. So what if they encountered a divine level expert? We'll still crush them with our numbers. In the miracle world, the sea god was very disdainful of the theory that an individual's martial prowess could crush a group. In his opinion, the reason why no one had been able to use second transition experts to kill a divine level expert was because there were too few of them. When I go on a rampage and plunder, bringing out 10 million second transition Magic Prince warriors, all divine level experts will have to make way for me. Quantity is the greatest power. Long live the human wave tactic. As the sea god thought about it, a fervent look appeared in his eyes. As long as he took down the Western Sea, he would be able to send out an army of over 1 million people before the Empire could react. He would not be afraid, even if there were 2 or 3 divine level experts. Moreover, the sea god himself was also a divine level expert. As long as he led his army onto the Western Sea and fought his way through, by the time everyone reacted, he would have already become a power that no one in the world could underestimate. Just like the Myriad Stars Palace and the School of Sword Arts, even the Empire's royal family would not be able to wipe them out. They could only join forces with them. Just as the sea god was thinking of this, a light pillar descended from the sky, piercing through the endless ocean and landing on the sand at the bottom of the sea. As the high temperature and heat swept out rapidly, countless bubbles were produced in the seawater. Waves of great explosions rang out at the bottom of the sea, creating intense turbulence that engulfed the sea god's army. There's an expert. The sea god opened his eyes and activated his divine level will. Streams of purple light spots flashed out explosively, forming a barrier that fended off the great explosions. It was only after 10 whole seconds that the great explosions gradually disappeared. However, the turbulence at the bottom of the sea continued on. It even formed cross-currents in the seawater, causing the seawater to seethe. The sea god let out a cold snort and got his army to wait for orders while he darted out toward the surface of the sea. The sea god's speed was extremely fast. Even with just his physical strength, he was able to dash out a distance of over 1,000 meters in an instant. Within a short few seconds, he had already gotten close to the surface of the sea. He stuck his head out, casually scanned with his martial will, and discovered Fong Xinjian and Tyrant who were standing in midair. Who are these 2 kids? Just as the sea god was thinking of this, a white light shot out from Fong Xinjian's palm. The terrifyingly high temperature and astonishingly high pressure were as if a sun had plunged down from the sky and smashed into the water's surface. Wherever it passed by, the air and seawater would be heated up into a plasma state. A large area of the seawater evaporated. From the periphery to the center, the high temperature of several thousand, 10,000, or even several 100,000 degrees Celsius heated up countless animals. The area within a range of several kilometers was heated up into a seafood soup. The white light once again shot through layers of the sea's surface, heating up the seawater along the way and eventually creating a great explosion at the bottom of the sea. The explosion blasted through a large piece of rock stratum at the bottom of the sea. The seawater plunged, causing the surface of the sea to become unstable. Therefore, new waves gushed out in all directions. After a portion of them overlapped with the tsunami from earlier, the other portion of them continued to dash out toward the coast. Damn it, are they coming for me? How on earth did they find out about my actions? These two people are so strong. Are they the Empire's divine level experts? Almost at the moment this terrifying attack was unleashed, the sea god retreated crazily. The purple martial will was like a light cocoon protecting him, continuously fending off the repercussions of the attack. Yes, it was because this god-perishing palm was not aimed at him. He only needed to fend off the repercussions of the attack. What powerful means. It's a pity that you missed. The corners of the sea god's lips curled up into a hint of a cold smile. Then it's my turn to make a move. In the sky, Feng Xingjian frowned. It seems to have gotten even worse. Tyron put out his palm. Idiot, the explosion you created is a little more powerful than mine. The tsunamis you created weren't able to cancel each other out. Let me try again. The sea god was just about to make a move when another light pillar that penetrated through the heavens and earth descended from the sky. The seawater on the surface of the sea seemed as if it was boiling, seething incessantly with water vapor. You want to take turns to deplete my martial will? But you missed again. Is it because the power of this move is too great, making it hard to control and easy for you to miss? The sea god's gaze narrowed, and the purple martial will grew increasingly denser. It isolated the high temperature and high pressure outside and continued to protect his body. However, this was just the beginning. As the two people in the sky took turns to attack, the sea god's gaze grew increasingly desperate. This won't do. You've attacked a little more this time around. Let me try again. This won't do. This time around, you've attacked a little less. The tsunamis seem to be getting stronger. It's 500 meters high now. This still won't do. I've used a little more power. There's too much water vapor. It's going to be a storm. Tyrant, go and blow them away. The underwater volcano has erupted. That shouldn't be the case. How many meters of the Earth's crust have we penetrated? If the sea god's gaze was one of wariness and solemnness at the beginning, then 1 minute later, this gaze turned into astonishment and horror. 5 minutes later, the sea god's gaze turned into one of despair. 10 minutes later, his gaze turned numb. He lifted his head to look at the two people in midair and thought, these two people are so powerful. Could it be that they're gods? Chapter 521. After much difficulty, Tyrant wiped his forehead and said, I'm dead tired. I'll need at least a week to replenish the energy I've depleted today. Feng Xingjian took in a deep breath, and the wind and clouds in the surroundings moved as if there was a strong gale blowing. He inhaled a tremendous amount of ether particles into his lungs. However, compared to the depletion earlier, it was still a drop in the bucket. Feng Xingjian said, although the density of ether particles has increased by a lot, our ether organs have yet to reach perfection. Our ability to absorb the energy and information from ether particles is insufficient, and the rate of recovery is still too slow compared to our depletion. Tyron sensed the ether particles in the air and said, with such a high density, although many people are able to cultivate at a faster rate, second transition conferred knights who do not have sufficient willpower would be more likely to go berserk when faced with such an increased amount of information, right? Feng Xingjian nodded and looked in the direction where the sea god was. Tyrant also looked over. A small purple fish? Oh, that's not right. It seems to be a magic prince warrior. Just as the two of them looked at the sea god, his countenance turned pale and his muscles trembled fiercely. Then he darted out like a bolt of lightning, and purple light burst out from his body, as if wanting to slice the entire sea into two in an instant. In the blink of an eye, he had already darted out a distance of over 10 kilometers, as if something was chasing after him. Let's go. Let's go immediately. To think that there are such terrifying people in Miracle World. Let's head north. We mustn't make enemies out of these two people. In that instant, the sea god left far away, swearing to stay far away from the west coast and never come back again. Tyrant licked his lips and looked greedily at the sea god, who had escaped into the distance. He touched his hair, which was emitting white light, and said, Aren't we going to capture him? I don't know him. There's no feud between us. There's no need to bother with him. Fang Xingjian looked in the direction of the great western city and said, "Let's go back." In an extremely luxurious manner in the great western city, it was currently pitch black. All of the servants had disappeared, and the atmosphere had become eerie. This was Hildebrand's manor. Ever since his grandfather, who was one of the top 3 students in the regional academy and the pillar of support for his clan, a demigod expert with 1-tier perfection, had passed away 3 months ago, the status of his clan had been on a decline. The various branch clans were fighting amongst themselves, and their influence and wealth continued to crumble. Hildebrand was extremely depressed, and he dismissed all the servants in the manor. It was said that he drowned his sorrows in alcohol every day, and from time to time, screams of terror could be heard from the depths of the manor. In the basement of the manor, Hildebrand was kneeling on the ground, holding onto his head. His eyes were wide open, and his pupils were moving around unconsciously. His expression was extremely savage. Get out, all of you. It's useless. Hand over your body. Give them to me. No, give me the body. Get lost, all of you. His body is mine. Over the past 3 months, the density of ether particles had increased rapidly. Not only had there been more energy, but the information contained within the ether particles had also increased. The cultivation of Confer Knights had also experienced more tests of their will. Ether particles contained all sorts of information about the past, present, and future. Of course, they also contained information about many individuals. In the long flow of history, countless great people had left behind remnants of their information in the world. The experiences, history, and other information contained both advantages and disadvantages to many knights. It was just like when Fang Xingjian was in the Sacred Land. As long as his will was strong enough, he would be able to learn the sword art's experience left behind by the experts of the past. Those with weak wills would be affected by the personal information and end up going berserk. Therefore, when faced with a rapid increase in the density of ether particles, powerful knights will be able to read through the information directly, get rid of the impurities and extract the essence, and increase their cultivation further. Those with weak wills might go crazy or enter a vegetative state. Moreover, because the density of ether particles was too high and there was too much information, there would be an effect that would not occur under normal circumstances. The cultivator would be affected by the personal information, and they would develop a split personality. It was like the legendary case of the spirits of the dead being possessed and the spirits of the dead being revived. For the past 3 months, Hildebrand had been at the lowest point of his life. Under such a situation, a tremendous amount of information gushed into his mind. Many of them represented personal memories, emotions, and the like. They gradually settled down in his mind, causing his mind to become increasingly chaotic. In Hildebrand's consciousness, a red-haired middle-aged man said, "Give up, Hildebrand. Right now, your will is already riddled with holes. If this goes on and more personal information enters your mind, you'll go completely crazy." Another golden-haired fatso darted out from Hildebrand's consciousness and said, "Damn it, this is the first time I've encountered such a situation. The last time I woke up was several hundred years ago. This isn't called waking up." A monster that had countless heads and tentacles all over its body said, "It's just that the density of ether particles has increased. Because of the personal information gushing into his body, people like us who had died a long time ago have come back to life with the help of his brain. As a ghost, you can also say that it's his other personality." Several tens of strangely shaped consciousnesses kept on arguing in Hildebrand's mind, attempting to seize the space in which they each lived. Hildebrand bellowed, "All of you scram. What kind of joke is this? I was the #1 swordsman in the world 300 years ago. I'm the guardian king of the holy sea of truth. I really want to kill all of you. I was the #1 genius in black magic 1,000 years ago, the Black Fiend Sovereign. Listen to me. Everyone, wait a minute. Let's hear what this idiot has to say." To be able to leave behind their own information in ether particles, survive after entering a knight's consciousness, and even revive in a Confer Knight's consciousness, all of them were strong experts. Right now, Hildebrand's consciousness had absorbed too much personal information and memories. If they were to quarrel, no one would be willing to give in to the other, and there would be no conclusion to the quarrel. Just then, in Hildebrand's mind, another group of consciousnesses started to awaken after they had accumulated enough memories and other information. In the sea of consciousness, a man in a white coat slowly opened his eyes. In front of him, there were giants that were tens of thousands of times taller than him, incomparably ferocious monsters, and a monarch that seemed to rule over the world. Looking at the other consciousnesses who were emitting extremely dangerous auras, the man wearing a white coat rubbed his eyes and said, "Am I dreaming?" He sensed his own body and said, "Is there anyone who can explain what is going on?" Trash. A strong man in golden armor, who was riding on a black dragon, said, "I'm Marudo, the king of the seas, the king of the sky, and the king of the earth. I soar above all the gods." Another child wearing formal attire said impatiently, "You're just a young island lord. Your cultivation is at tier 3 of the divine level, and you came from 3,000 years ago. If you were born 500 years later, I'd definitely kick you like a ball." The little girl looked at the man wearing a white coat and said, "Lad, the 7th epoch is here. Do you understand? Anyway, this body's condition isn't very good. Why don't you report your background first? If your background is great enough, we might listen to you." Countless monsters, heroes, and mages looked at the man wearing a white coat. The man blinked and said, I remember that I used to work in the Beijing Mental Health Center." Chapter 5:22. Where is Beijing? What's a mental health center? This person's attire is so strange. Just as the many souls were looking at the man in a white coat with curiosity and puzzlement, an elderly man walked out slowly, holding onto a walking stick, and said, "You said that you're from Beijing?" The little girl asked, "Grand Duke Alba, you're from the Jade Dynasty 5,000 years ago. Could it be that you know this Beijing?" This Grand Duke Alba was the #1 scholar of the Jade Dynasty that had unified the entire world 5,000 years ago. Everyone was very impressed by his erudition. Grand Duke Alba nodded and said, "The world we're in has suffered from some unknown curse. According to the records in the Book of Origin, there will be a total of 12 calamities, which can also be called the 12 onslaughts. And before each calamity, in order to protect this world, the God of universal truth will increase the density of ether particles, allowing humans to become stronger rapidly. It will also allow us, who have already died, to have a chance to return to the mortal world. In addition to my experiences when I was alive, this is the 3rd time I've come to fight against a crisis." Hearing Grand Duke Alba's words, everyone present was secretly shocked. This seemingly inconspicuous old man was probably the one with the highest realm and knew the most secrets among the people present. However, before the birth of the Book of Origin, it was said that before the first onslaught, there was an era known as the Miracle Era. That was a very, very miraculous era. However, due to the first onslaught, the civilization of that era was completely destroyed. With the repeated onslaughts, the records left behind were pitifully few. I only found out about a place called Beijing from countless historical sites. It should be a great city during the Miracle Era. After Grand Duke Alba said this, everyone's gazes toward the man in a white coat changed. They were filled with awe, curiosity, and respect, especially since the other party's information had existed for such a long time. How strong was his will? As the #1 scholar of the Jade Dynasty, Grand Duke Alba was extremely passionate about history. Right now, he looked at the man in a white coat and asked, "May I ask what the civilization of the Miracle Era was like before the first onslaught?" "Oh, you want to ask this?" The man in a white coat scratched his head and said, "It's hard to explain with just words." "It's fine," Grand Duke Alba said. "Right now, we're just information and have no power. However, it's also very convenient for us to communicate. As long as you're willing to transmit information and think about what you've seen and heard, we'll naturally be able to see it." "I see." The white coat scientist clapped his hands and said, "That's good. Speaking of our era, it was really interesting. In front of the many monsters, heroes, kings, and powerhouses, a magnificent scene was born. On the small planet, various heroes who surpassed the speed of light, moved planets, and traversed through time were fighting. Superman, the Flash, Thor, Hulk, and many other experts displayed world-shaking powers. Outside the planet, various deities, immortals, Buddhas, demons, and angels were all paying attention to the human planet. Watching the planet devour a star. Watching Superman lift an entire continent. Watching the race called Scions destroy worlds. Wait, why is this Scion drawn? Oh, that's not true. The white coat man said, you have to remember, Scion, One Piece, Naruto, these things are all fake. Superman, the Flash, Sun Wukong, and Santa Claus are the real deal. Seeing that everyone was nodding seriously, the white coat scientist then continued to recall, let me tell you, there's no future for you guys to keep staying on your own planet. Only by being like Luke Skywalker and walking out of the planet and training hard will you be able to save the entire Milky Way. The little girl asked, who is Luke Skywalker? The white coat scientist said agitatedly, a great warrior, a famous hero in the Milky Way, and also my mentor. Following that, there were various interstellar spaceships, Yamato battleships, Death Stars, and Zergs. Looking at the scene of a human fleet sailing through the galaxy, fighting against various robots, Zergs, orcs, and star spirits, Grand Duke Alba said in astonishment, is this the miracle era? How powerful! To think that such an era has been destroyed. Right now, in the process of communicating with Alba, the white coat scientist had gained an understanding of miracle world history. The white coat scientist said, I also didn't expect that humans would encounter such a calamity. I'm afraid that I would have died before the first onslaught. It's a pity that my cultivation wasn't of any use. Right now, everyone's gazes toward the white coat scientist were filled with respect and awe. Seated on the black dragon, Maruto, the Ocean King, the Sky King, and the Earth King said, I haven't asked for Mister's name. Mister, what do you think we should do now? My name is Tai, the white coat scientist said solemnly. People call me True Lord Qingshan. I once massacred millions and millions of living beings with a wave of my hand. My eyes saw through a myriad of worlds, and with a light tap of my finger, I destroyed countless universes. After reaching the peak, I saw through the mortal world and lived in seclusion in the Beijing Mental Health Center, contributing to the evolution of humanity's spirit. If you guys believe in me, then let's unite and fight against the seventh onslaught together. All right, True Lord Qingshan, tell us. We'll listen to you. Everyone, listen to True Lord Qingshan. Then I won't pass on this responsibility. Tai, he bellowed. Since that's the case, let's swear an oath of blood today. In order to fight against the seventh onslaught, we'll unite and form an organization. I hereby announce that the name of the organization shall be Shang. Right now, our first goal is to let everyone borrow bodies to be reborn. Then we'll gather all the reincarnators in the world and fight against the seventh onslaught together. Elsewhere, Feng Xingjian had returned to his seclusion in the sacred land. The moment he arrived, he saw Feng Qian floating in midair. Her entire body was burning with gray flames. What a dense diabolic energy. Tyron's brows twitched, and he said, at this level, she might be able to go up against a demigod with 2 tiers of perfection. Half a year ago, Feng Qian had only been able to go up against a demigod with 1 tier of perfection. It was easy to level up her magic prints, but after reaching level 29, she would need to slowly grind and improve them. Right now, the power of Feng Qian's magic prints had become so strong that she could go up against a demigod with 2 tiers of perfection. This was a terrifying rate of improvement, and it showed how great the influence of the world's metamorphosis was. As the two of them arrived, Feng Qian opened her eyes abruptly. When she looked at Feng Xingjian, there was a hint of eagerness in her eyes. Over the past 3 months, not only had the density of ether particles increased, but it had also become increasingly easier to obtain diabolic energy. This caused Feng Qian's confidence to increase tremendously. She even wondered if she could challenge Fang Xingjian a little. However, just as this thought flashed through her mind, Fang Xingjian threw her a light glance. With just this glance, Fang Qian felt as if a basin of cold water had been poured over her head. In the time it took for this glance, she felt as if she had been dismembered into a million pieces, with a myriad of swords piercing through her heart. An intense feeling of death encompassed her body, and the diabolic energy in her body went out of control. The gray flames shattered, and she dropped to the ground. Chapter 5:23. Fang Qian smiled bitterly and said, "Your sword intent has become even more terrifying. Looks like this trip to Demonic City went very smoothly." Fang Xingjian nodded and said, "Li Shuanghua has committed suicide. Fang Yuehe is now the Fang clan's clan head." Fang Xingjian then gave a simple explanation of what had happened. Fang Qian looked at Fang Xingjian with a gaze filled with astonishment. She had not expected that Fang Xingjian would be so generous. Not only had he forced Li Shuanghua to commit suicide, but he had also taken control of the Fang clan. He had also killed the despot, subdued the Thunder Monarch, and defeated 3 divine-level experts within a short period of time. Although this was related to Earth's environment and Fang Xingjian's immunity to diabolic energy, it was still beyond Fang Qian's expectations. Thinking of this, Fang Qian looked at Fang Xingjian with some anticipation and said, "Xingjian, if Fang Xingjian comes to look for you, will you be able to save my younger brother?" "Your younger brother?" Fang Xingjian recalled that he had originally wanted to be Fang Xingqian's apostle. After he had escaped, Li Shuanghua had chosen a child from the branch family to be Fang Xingqian's apostle. That boy was Fang Qian's younger brother. Fang Xingjian nodded. "If he comes to me, I will let your brother live." "Thank you," Fang Qian said. "You just arrived here, so you must be very concerned about the situation in the Great Western City, right?" "Not bad. What's the situation?" Although Fang Qian had been staying in the Sacred Land, this did not mean that she was unaware of the situation in the outside world. As a Gray Faction Magic Prince warrior, she could always summon life forms from alternate worlds to help her investigate the situation in the outside world. "It's not optimistic." Fang Qian shook her head and said, "The first prince succeeded in striving for the divine level 3 months ago. Thereafter, the entire central government started to undergo a change of blood, and various people under the first prince took up important positions. Then from 2 months ago, the various key positions in the 8 regions also started to change. Right now, the Great Western region's deputy governor was Benjamin. With the first prince's influence, Benjamin had already made Great Western region's Governor Devitt a mere figurehead. It should be said that the second prince's subordinates in Atlantis are either a figurehead or marginalized. Tyron said, "First Prince George can't be said to have the best aptitude, but his luck is really good. Not only has he received full nurturing from the ancient path of hell, but he has also received the help of the world's metamorphosis. By the looks of it, even the Empire's king has chosen him as his successor. He has taken advantage of all the favorable conditions. This is especially so for the divine-level experts on the Path of Knights. They did not even borrow any diabolic energy at all. Their physical bodies are also much stronger than Magic Prince warriors. They probably won't be as easy to deal with as Li Shuanghua." Fang Xingjian nodded. To him, the divine level in the Path of Knights was much more powerful than the divine level in Magic Prince warriors. Moreover, the first prince had obtained the royal family's resources and was striving for the divine level with 4 tiers of perfection. He would probably be much stronger than ordinary divine level knights. At the thought of this, Fang Xingjian asked, "Tyrant, do you know the difference in strength between divine level experts?" Tyrant said, "There definitely is. However, I'm not a divine level expert from the Terran Shrine after all. Therefore, I don't know the specifics. I only know that the divine level can be divided into 10 tiers, and the disparity between divine level experts of different tiers is unimaginably great. However, before the world's metamorphosis, one can at most reach the first tier of the divine level. It's only after the world's metamorphosis that one can attain further breakthroughs. In the past, the divine level experts in the entire miracle world could at most reach tier 1 of the divine level. However, once the world's metamorphosis started, the density of ether particles and diabolic energy increased crazily, and the entire miracle world's magnetic field started to change. It was only then that the tiers above tier 1 of the divine level could be attained. Fang Xingjian suddenly thought of Li Shuanghua's performance. She had gone from the materialization of her will to the transformation of her will into flesh and blood. Did this mean that she had attained a breakthrough from tier 1 of the divine level to tier 2 of the divine level? Was it because the changes in miracle world had affected the changes on Earth? Fang Xingjian asked again. Then what about the national selection? Has it ended? Fang Qian shook her head and said, "It's been decided that this year's national selection will be postponed for 3 months." In the Great Western Region's Regional Academy, a young man with sword-like brows, who was dressed in a night attire, was walking in the direction of the sacred land. The young man exuded a sharp aura, like an unsheathed sharp sword. It was as if he would not back down in the slightest, no matter what happened before him. Behind him, the academy's superintendent said anxiously, Sir, please wait a moment. Fang Xingjian is still cultivating in seclusion. Why don't we wait a few more days?" The young man stopped, turned to look at the academy's superintendent, and said coldly, "I'm Lord Benjamin's chief assistant, and I'm currently in charge of matters in the regional academy. Does a mere student like Fang Xingjian, a kid who doesn't even have an official position, have the right to avoid meeting me? Moreover, the time limit for him to use the sacred land has long since expired. However, he still refuses to let go of it, affecting the distribution of the academy's teaching resources. This is something that I absolutely cannot tolerate." The time limit for Fang Xingjian to use the sacred land had been set by Governor Devitt for a year. Now that a year had passed since the regional selection last year, it had naturally expired. With the world's metamorphosis, the ether particle density had increased tremendously. The ether particle density in the sacred land had also increased due to the increase in the outside world, and its value had also increased. Hearing the young man's words, the academy's superintendent felt a headache coming on. The young man before him was not an ordinary person. He was ranked 3rd in the previous national selection, known as the Swordless Sword, Asto. He was also the current Deputy Governor Benjamin's chief assistant, as well as the person in charge of the entire Great Western Region's Regional Academy for the past month. The most famous thing about this young man, known as the Swordless Sword, was that he had once fought against the School of Sword Art Supreme Chief, Hung Tianxiao, for 3,000 moves without being defeated. In the end, he had lost by 1 move due to a lack of stamina. He was a renowned demigod expert in the Empire. Based on the first prince's actions over the past 3 months, the next major reform he was going to carry out was to separate the positions of the Regional Academy's headmaster and the Great Region's governor. In the past, the Regional Academy's headmaster and the Great Region's governor had always been held by the same person. This was a flaw left behind by the 8 divine-level experts who had founded the empire. Now that the first prince was going to reform this, it was clear that he wanted to further weaken the authority of the Great Region's governors. If all the conferred knights in each region had graduated from the Regional Academy, and the Regional Academy's headmaster was the governor of this region, then how great would the potential influence of the governor be? The first prince wanted to make use of the news of him successfully attaining the divine level. Simultaneously, the empire's king and the ancient path of hell's sect master, 2 veteran divine level experts, were supporting him. He also had many experts under him, and his influence was overwhelming. Making use of his overwhelming influence, the first prince wanted to completely reform this flaw. As the second prince's important stronghold, the Great Western Region was given special attention by the first prince. Right now, even a blind person would be able to tell that the future governor of the Great Western Region was probably the current Deputy Governor, Benjamin. And the future Regional Academy's headmaster was probably the current chief assistant, the Swordless Sword, Asto. Thinking of those messy and abnormally dangerous battles, the superintendent felt a headache coming on. Regardless of whether it was the old governor, the head of department, or the influential figures who were going to reform under the first prince's support, he did not wish to offend any of them. He could only sigh and continue to follow Asto toward the sacred land. Chapter 524. Asto walked slowly toward the sacred land. The reason he was doing so slowly was to give the other party time to prepare. He believed that with the first prince's current prowess and the other party's current situation, they would make the right choice. If Fang Xingjian were to rush over and force the other party, it would be bad if the other party were to act rashly and decide to fight to the death. However, even if the other party were to go all out, Fang Xingjian had the confidence to suppress them. Simultaneously, he recalled the information related to Fang Xingjian in his mind. To him, Fang Xingjian's talent in sword arts could be considered to be extremely outstanding. It's a pity that he was born in the wrong era, or rather, he chose the wrong path. Asto thought, Fang Xingjian, other people might not know where you've gone, but how can we not know? Although we don't know what you've been up to, do you really think that we're dead for flying all the way to the west coast in such a flashy manner? The first prince, or rather, the upper echelon of the first prince's faction, all knew of Earth's existence. Especially after working together with Li Shuanghua, they knew even more information. However, other than some special research, they did not pay much attention to Earth's martial prowess. They knew that Earth was a desolate land with no experts. Although they could level up quickly, they were far from being able to compare to knights and even divine-level experts in the Empire. It's a pity that Fang Xingjian, although your talent is outstanding, you had to leave at the most critical moment when the world's metamorphosis was about to happen. Over the past 3 months, the density of ether particles has been increasing rapidly. Not only have all the top-notch experts in the world been getting stronger at a rapid rate, but they've also received various cultivation experiences and secret martial arts techniques from the ether particles. Their abilities have improved tremendously. These 3 months have been fatal for you. It was in these 3 months that you widened the gap between you and the experts of the present age. 2 years ago, my sword arts had yet to reach perfection, and I had no choice but to lose to Hung Tianxiao's Astral Obscurity sword after 3,000 moves. Asto sighed and said, "You forced Hung Tianxiao to retreat, and I wanted to prove what I've learned by defeating you. However, 3 months have passed, and I have no idea how far Hung Tianxiao has progressed. Now that I've defeated you, there's no way for me to prove that I'm stronger than Hung Tianxiao." Just as Otto's was thinking about this, he suddenly stopped in his tracks. He stood in front of the entrance of the 100 times concentration and looked at the people walking toward him. They were Zhou Xingwen, Andre, and Lilia. Before Fang Xingjian left, the 3 of them had all received the legacy of the 3rd level of the mystical prince. It could be said that their aptitudes were worlds apart from before. Over the past 3 months, the world had undergone a metamorphosis, and the density of ether particles had increased rapidly. This had greatly increased their cultivation speed. After all, aside from increasing one's aptitude, Mystical Prince also had the ability to filter information to reduce the chances of one going berserk. Right now, Zhou Xingwen had already reached level 25 and started to condense specialty seeds. The auras of 50 specialty seeds rose up from his body. Lilia had also completed her 2nd transition and reached level 24. She kept on absorbing all sorts of light and heat energy in the surroundings to replenish her energy. However, the person who was even more astonished was Andre. Right now, the auras of over 100 specialty seeds were rising in Andre's body. Not only had he reached level 25, but he had even surpassed Zhou Xingwen. However, although their growth was very fast, they were still far from being a threat to the swordless sword, Otto's. As an expert who had been on par with the School of Sword Art Supreme Chief 2 years ago, Otto's had long since become a demigod with 2 tiers of perfection in his body's toughness and specialty seeds. He had been preparing to strive for the 3rd tier of perfection in brain regeneration. Over the past 3 months, He had continued to receive the impact of information from ether particles and had sparred with countless experts throughout history. He had honed his sword arts and will time and time again, improving rapidly in all aspects. His cultivation had also finally reached a breakthrough point. Therefore, 1 week ago, he had finally completed the difficulty of brain regeneration and possessed a body that was almost indestructible. Moreover, Otto's killing technique, the swordless sword, had been supplemented by many ancient sword techniques, becoming increasingly perfect. I heard that after Hung Tianxiao was defeated, he followed the school of sword art's previous supreme chief, sword slayer of the secular world. I wonder how strong he has become. Even though Zhou Xingwen and the others were before him, Otto's was still thinking about his competitor, Hung Tianxiao. Zhou Xingwen said, "Lord Assistant, may I know why you've come to the sacred land?" Otto's threw a cold glance at Lilia and said, "The sacred land is a forbidden area in the academy. Everyone can only cultivate in different areas based on their own qualifications. What's the matter with this woman? I remember that she's not a student of the academy, right?" Zhou Xingwen had not expected that Otto's would not even bother with pleasantries and use Lilia as an excuse. He thought to himself, "It seems that there's no room for reconciliation." Zhou Xingwen said, "She's a servant appointed by Xinjiang and is in charge of taking care of Xinjiang's daily life. The academy stipulates that cultivators can bring 1 to 2 servants with them, right?" Don't let me find out that she's using the regional academy's resources. Otherwise, even if it's Fang Xinjiang, I won't let him off," Otto said calmly. "Where's Fang Xinjiang? Why hasn't he come to see me?" Zhou Xingwen said honestly, "Xinjiang is cultivating in seclusion. Before he went into seclusion, he instructed that no one is to disturb him. He's just a student of the regional academy. Since when did he have such authority? Now that his authority to use the sacred land has expired, does he still want to occupy a spot?" Zhou Xingwen said, "The governor has instructed that in order to make preparations for the national selection, Xinjiang could be given a special extension of 3 months. Preposterous." Otto's let out a cold snort, and streams of sword intents filled up the entire world, pressing out toward Zhou Xingwen and the other 2. The 3 of them looked defeated and on the verge of collapse. The resources of the entire regional academy don't belong to Fang Xinjiang alone. With so many students waiting behind him, what right does he have to extend the time? If there's no fairness at all, how is he going to manage the entire academy? How is he going to convince the masses? Under the tremendous pressure, Zhou Xingwen's teeth kept on chattering. He plucked up his courage and said, "Sir, this is the governor's instruction." He said, "Be ****starred." With a loud bang, Zhou Xingwen was sent flying by a slap from Otto's. Along the way, he knocked away over 100 great trees, and over 10 mounds of soil fell to the ground. Otto's looked coldly at Anderson and Lilia, who were left behind, and said, "Right now, I'm in charge of all the matters in the academy. In the future, the separation of the headmaster and the governor's positions is also the first prince's idea. This is a future national policy. Do the 2 of you still have any objections?" Anderson frowned and clenched his fists tightly. The shadow under his feet started to tremble, as if he would take action at any moment. Otto's looked at him with a cold smile, as if waiting for Anderson to make his move. Given Anderson's character, he would not be able to accept someone treating him so arrogantly. However, the other party was a demigod expert, and he was not a match for him at all. If he were to take action, he would only be seeking his own humiliation. Have you said enough? If you said enough, then scram. It's not up to you to handle the academy's matters. Just as Anderson was hesitating, Lilia made her move. With a soft bellow, the longsword in Lilia's hand pierced out toward Otto's at lightning speed. Chapter 525. Lilia's sword attack was as fast as a meteor. With a single thrust, sonic booms rang out consecutively. Wherever it passed by, it was as if a vacuum passageway had been slashed open in the air. The speed of her sword had reached 15 times that of supersonic speed. From this sword attack, it could be seen that Lilia had improved tremendously during this period of time. In fact, she had never lacked passion for sword arts. It was just that she was not talented enough and did not have a great teacher to guide her, so her abilities were limited. However, with the guidance of a grandmaster in sword arts like Feng Xingjian, as well as the changes to the mystical prince which had increased her aptitude, coupled with her passion and hard work which she did not lack to begin with, she had improved very quickly. Especially because of her relationship with Feng Xingjian, she had chosen the Windstorm Sword Hero for her first transition and the Gale Sword Deity for her second transition. Her speed had already surpassed that of second transition experts of the same level. With this attack, her speed was 15 times that of supersonic speed. It was as if the space within a range of 100 meters had been slashed into two by this sword attack. However, although Lilia's improvement was fast enough and her abilities were among the top amongst those of the same level, she was still facing a demigod with 3 tiers of perfection. As the third place in the previous national selection, there is no need to mention how talented Asto was. Moreover, he had even signed the Hell's map and grasped the power that represented nothingness in the 36 Hell's maps. With this as his foundation, coupled with his sword arts cultivation, he had created his unique killing technique, the swordless sword. Asto did not move. When the tip of Lilia's sword was just 1 zhang away from Asto's body, he let out a stifled grunt. It was as if he had collided into a mountain. His long sword shattered and he was sent flying, spewing out a mouthful of blood. She rolled over 10 rounds on the ground before she managed to neutralize the force from Asto's attack. She lifted her head to look at Asto and thought, "What attacked me earlier?" Asto's swordless sword was a power that could keep on changing between the illusory and the real world. When he turned his power into an illusory form, his sword force would not affect anything in the real world, nor would it be affected by anything in the real world. These waves of sword force permeated the area within 10 feet around him. They did not affect the physical world, nor were they affected by the physical world. When he turned this sword force into something real, it would start to affect the physical world. Because his ethereal body was not affected by the physical world, he could use a rotating sword force on his body. The rotating sword force would not weaken as it was not affected by the physical world. It would forever surround Asto's body until the day it turned into a physical body. Therefore, although there seemed to be nothing within 1 zhang around Asto, in reality, there was an unknown amount of sword force that had been converted into intangible forms stored there. The amount was probably countless times greater than Asto's limit. With the swordless sword surrounding him, Feng Xingjian would not be afraid even if he would take on a divine-level expert's attack head-on. Coupled with the fact that he had reached the realm of brain regeneration, his defensive prowess was so strong that it was rare in the world. Asto looked at Lilia and said, "Attacking the country's conferred knight is a crime punishable by death. Die." As he spoke, he tapped out with a finger, and a gush of sword force around him took on a physical form, shooting out toward Lilia. The terrifying sword force compressed the air, leaving behind streams of white energy that shot toward Lilia's head like lasers. Anderson's countenance changed, and many black shadows flashed, appearing before the sword force. In each shadow, there were shadow blades slashing out, wanting to block the white energy. However, although Asto seemed to be casually attacking, the materialized sword force was equivalent to a full-powered attack from his physical body. How could Anderson possibly fend it off? The shadow blades were damaged, and Anderson fell to the ground, bleeding from his 7 apertures. The sword force did not weaken in the slightest, and continued to strike out toward Lilia. Just as the sword force was about to pierce through Lilia's head, Lilia raised her right hand in a miraculous manner, slashing out with her sword fingers and splitting the sword force into 2. The sword force passed through Lilia's left and right, passing through several kilometers of forest and leaving behind 2 long corridors of ruins. Asto frowned, unable to understand how Lilia had managed to fend off this attack. Lilia was also a little stunned. Just then, Feng Xingjian's voice rang out in her mind. "Don't be afraid. Just follow my instructions." In the spatial gaps, Feng Xingjian stood next to Lilia. Simultaneously, Streams of sword intent were channeled into Lilia's brain, directing her actions. Lilia said excitedly, "Master, you've come out from your seclusion?" Fangxing Zhan said calmly, "Focus. Let's deal with this guy before us first." Lilia nodded heavily and wiped off the blood at the corner of her lips. She pointed toward Asto with one sword finger and placed her other hand behind her back, getting into a standard stance to face off against an enemy. Asto smiled. "Interesting. Let me see how many more moves you can take." As he spoke, he put out his hand and beckoned. Over 1,000 streams of sword force gushed forth, encompassing Lilia like a violent storm. Lilia felt as if her body was being hugged by someone. It was as if there was a strong hand in void space grabbing onto her wrist. Even though over 1,000 streams of sword force encompassed her, she did not feel the slightest hint of fear. There was only tranquility in her heart. She slashed out with her sword fingers, creating many afterimages and forming many vortexes. The over 1,000 streams of sword force were like wanderers returning home. They merged together, turning into a tornado that spun around Lilia's fingertips. "What?" Asto looked at this scene in disbelief. To think that not only had Lilia fended off his sword force, she had even absorbed it and turned it into her own power. Excellent, excellent, excellent. To think that you're another genius. However, to think that you're rebelling against the Empire's authority at such a young age. Don't blame me for being ruthless. As Asto spoke, his entire body trembled. He had transformed over 10,000 streams of sword force into ferocious sword force. Their speed and power far surpassed that of a level 29 conferred knight. The release of this power could be said to be world-shaking, causing the world to change. Just as the sword force appeared, violent sound waves gushed out toward the entire sacred land. However, the sword force did not spread out. Instead, it condensed into a single point and attacked out toward Lilia like a light needle. The speed of this explosive attack was so fast that it would be able to smash Lilia into dust within 1,000th of a second. It would then create a 10-centimeter wide vacuum passageway several tens of kilometers behind her, piercing through all matter wherever it passed by. This attack was purely relying on one's abilities to bully others. With Lilia's 5 attributes, there was no way she could react to it. Even if she could react to it, she would not be able to fend it off. However, Lilia now had Fangxing Zhan backing her up. Therefore, just as the sword force was about to strike Lilia's chest, Fangxing Zhan also activated the infiltrating void. A gush of power exploded on Lilia's arm, driving her sword fingers to tap toward Asto's sword force. With this collision, the sword force seemed to have turned from a violent wild beast into a docile sheep. It danced on Lilia's palm, no longer showing any signs of aggression. Chapter 5:26. What? Asto looked at this scene in disbelief and bellowed in his heart. What's going on? This attack has over 10,000 streams of sword force merged together, and its speed far surpasses the reaction of conferred knight. To think that she's able to instantly tap on it and even break the balance of the 10,000 streams of sword force. Is she a human or a ghost? However, that was not all. Under Fangxing Zhan's control, Lilia's entire arm soon could not hold on any longer. Her flesh broke down as if it would disintegrate at any moment. Even with Lilia's powerful physical body, which had been cultivated from the 3rd level of the Mystical Prince and the Gale Sword Divinity, she was still unable to withstand Fangxing Zhan's power. Therefore, Lilia tapped lightly with her fingertip, and the 10,000 streams of sword force slashed out in Asto's direction. Faced with his attack being turned into an attack by his opponent, Asto's countenance turned extremely cold, and his killing intent toward Lilia rose to an extreme. Faced with Lilia's counterattack, Asto waved his hand casually, and several 10,000 streams of sword force burst forth. He wanted to fend off the attack and then continue to kill Lilia. However, when the 10,000 streams of sword force merged into a single point and neared Asto, they suddenly exploded, turning into a myriad of meteors and shooting out toward Asto. What? To think that she can make the sword force explode in midair. How'd she do that? Asto did not have the time to think about the theory behind this. He quickly controlled the sword force around him to neutralize his opponent's scattered attacks. However, as streams of sword force burst out from his body, his countenance turned increasingly grim. Each time an explosive stream of sword force collided with the other party's sword force, it would be instantly neutralized by the other party's sword force and then turned back to attack him. He felt as if he was facing a boundless ocean, and each of his attacks would only be reflected. An extremely intense attack and defense took place within one zhang around Asto. Asto's head was covered in cold sweat as he dealt with the attacks. However, as he unleashed more and more explosive sword force, the amount of sword force that was used by his opponent also increased. The terrifying attacks closed in on his body inch by inch, as if they were going to crush his body at the next moment. Impossible. How could there be such a thing? To think that I would lose to a young lady who hasn't even condensed a specialty seed? By the time Asto wanted to escape, it was already too late. The dense sword force enveloped his body and surged towards his physical body. He could only watch as the sword force he had unleashed was continuously used by his opponent. He watched as the crazily surging sword force approached his body inch by inch like countless locusts. If it was Lilia's attack, Asto, who had perfected his body's strength, would be able to take it head-on without moving or dodging. But now, he was facing his own attacks. At this moment, it was as if he was besieged by hundreds or thousands of himself. Finally, accompanied by a desperate cry, Asto's entire body instantly turned into a bloody man, kneeling on the ground with blood all over his body. However, it did not matter. As a powerhouse who had mastered the realm of brain regeneration, he could revive even if he was really chopped into pieces. Moreover, he had only been slashed to a point where his skin and flesh were torn. Damn it, I will kill you. This time, I definitely won't give you the chance to use my sword energy. Just as Asto let out a furious bellow and was about to take action, Lilia's cold voice rang out in his mind along with the transmission of information currents. If I were you, I'd take a look at the words on my body. Asto was stunned for a moment. At the next moment, the blood fog around him was shaken off, and he saw densely packed bloody words carved on his body. On Asto's chest, there were 6 big blood-colored words, breaking the swordless sword. It was not that she had not managed to kill him earlier. Instead, she had intentionally cut his skin to leave behind these big words. His entire body had been carved with a method to neutralize his sword force and break the swordless sword. In that instant, Asto's eyes were wide open, filled with confusion. He wanted to recover his body immediately and kill Lilia. However, if he were to recover his body, what would he do about the method to neutralize it? He yearned to preview the contents and perfect his sword technique. He scanned it with his heaven's perception and recorded down all the words and diagrams. However, the concept and aura were extremely profound, and he was unable to comprehend them within a short period of time. But was he to leave these scars on his body? If that were the case, he would no longer need to go out and mingle around. Asto let out an agonizing cry that sounded like that of a wild beast on the verge of death. He brought along a series of afterimages and disappeared before everyone's eyes. In the end, he decided to find a place with no one around and study the method to break the swordless sword first. Zhou Xingwen and Anderson had already arrived next to Lilia, looking at her in disbelief. Anderson's expression was extremely complicated. "Lilia, how on earth did you do it?" Lilia's face was flushed as she smiled and said, "It has nothing to do with me. Master was the one who did it." Xingjian? At the next moment, Fang Xingjian walked out from the spatial gaps. Seeing Fang Xingjian's appearance, Zhou Xingwen broke into a surprised expression. "Xingjian, you've come out from your seclusion?" Fang Xingjian nodded. "Get everyone here, including the head of department, the governor, and the others. I have some things to discuss with them." Zhou Xingwen nodded excitedly. Fang Xingjian had come out from his seclusion just in time. This was especially so when Fang Xingjian had defeated Asto so easily earlier. This made Zhou Xingwen so happy that he could not close his mouth. During this period of time, they had been mistreated quite a bit by Asto. Thinking of Asto, Zhou Xingwen could not help but say, "Oh, right. What about Benjamin?" Fang Xingjian said calmly, "Don't worry. As long as Asto comprehends the sword arts he has, he won't dare to make an enemy out of me. As for the deputy governor Benjamin that the first prince has sent, there will naturally be someone else to deal with him. Both Asto and Benjamin won't have the face to manage the great western region's affairs anymore." At the back door of a luxurious mansion in the great western city, Tyrant leaped over the wall with a light leap. When he landed on the ground, he had already taken on the appearance of a maid. He walked along the corridor, and when he turned a corner and saw a group of maids walking toward him, he had already taken on the appearance of a fully armed guard. Just like that, Fang Xingjian continued to transform, and in the blink of an eye, he arrived at the master bedroom of the luxurious mansion. Looking at the furnishings in the master bedroom, Tyrant's lips twitched. He's quite rich. However, when he thought of the things in the gates of the netherworld, he grinned. He looked around the bedroom, the study, and then the toilet. If I turn into a toilet bowl, I should be able to catch him off guard, right? That's not right. If it's a demigod, it doesn't seem like there's a need to poop. Then what if it turns into a bed? Demigods don't need to sleep either. If it's the study table, there are many books and documents that are half flipped through. There are also signs of them being used. It seems that when it comes to work, he still maintains the habits he had when he was a mortal. At the thought of this, Tyrant eventually walked to the back of the study table and put the chair into the gates of the netherworld with a single stretch of his hand. Hints of gray light flashed on his body as he activated the level 5 black magic, physical substance conversion. In that instant, his body turned into the original chair. It was not just the external appearance. Even the physical structure was exactly the same as the original chair. This level 5 black magic allowed him to turn himself into some common materials. However, even if he were to activate it, it would only last for a few minutes. It was because Tyrant was unable to allow all of his will to be attached to a physical substance for a prolonged period of time. However, ever since he started cultivating under Fang Xingjian, he had been continuously tempering his will. Right now, even if his body were to turn from flesh and blood into a physical substance, he would still be able to maintain it for 6 hours. Chapter 5:27. Has the Western region's tax revenue not been raised yet? Sir, the sudden increase of 10 tax points will probably be difficult for most commoners to pay. Increasing tax revenue is a national policy set by the first prince. In the past, our country's tax rate was too low for the sake of recuperating. Now that a great change is imminent, the Steel Lion Kingdom in the north, the Papal States, and the various tribes of the barbarians are all training their armies and upgrading their armaments. As the largest region on the West Coast, the Great Western region's maritime trade is extremely developed. It's also the region with the strongest commercial atmosphere out of the 8 regions. Therefore, it's even more important for us to take up this responsibility. In the study, a few members of the Great Western region's upper echelon were having a meeting with a white-haired, white-browed elderly man. The white-haired, white-browed elderly man did not look young, but he was still very spirited and vigorous. He was Benjamin, who had been sent by the first prince to take over the position of the Great Western region's governor. Oh, right. Have you guys heard? Manger's King Manger and the 2 divine level experts under him are all dead. What? Although Manger is a tribal structure, the King Manger's tribe controls over half of the influences in the entire Ice Plains. To think that he's been killed? Who did it? I don't know. I only know that Manger immediately chose a new King Manger, and there was no internal strife. The Ice Plains' 4 great tribes, no, it's now 3 great tribes. 3 great tribes and 7 great factions. To think that a new King Manger was chosen without any internal strife? That's enough. Benjamin coughed and said, "Manger is too far away from us, so there's no need to bother about him." Next, let's talk about the investment quota for the various academies. There needs to be a great increase in this area. Not only that, the number of knights recruited every year must also be increased. The management of conferred knights must also be stricter. Benjamin then discussed various aspects with his subordinates. From the contents of their discussion, it seemed that they had a rather good grasp of the entire Great Western region. Right now, the person under Benjamin was Tyrant, who had turned into a chair. As expected, the first prince's influence is overwhelming. He sent 2 demigod experts to the Great Western region and directly took over a large portion of the Great Western region's authority. Everywhere they passed by, everyone would surrender upon hearing the news. He took over the Great Western region without any bloodshed. Good move, really good move. Tyrant thought, but based on what I've seen and heard and what Feng Xingjian said, the second prince is at least at the 10th level of the mystical prince. The 4th prince is the representative of the Holy See of Truth. As for the 3rd prince, it's not the first time I've seen him in the Serene Shrine. There were also some special rumors about the 5th prince. None of these 5 rascals were easy to deal with. The first prince seemed to be having a good time, but the other 4 probably had their own tricks up their sleeves. Before the arrival of the 7th occurrence, there will definitely be a fierce battle. Just as Tyrant was thinking about this, the white-haired and white-browed Benjamin on top of him said, "Right, where is Othos? Didn't he go to persuade Feng Xingjian to surrender? Why isn't he back yet?" One of the subordinates said, "I don't know. I didn't see him." Benjamin frowned and said, "Feng Xingjian is a talent, but his character is too bad." He thought, to think that Feng Xingjian managed to pick up the astral obscurity sword in battle. He could be said to be a rare talent in sword arts. But he's too rash. To think that he attacked the Eastern Sand region's base and even abducted the base's experimental subjects. With such a character, he's probably not someone who would submit to others. Yet His Highness still wants to subdue him. Although he's broad-minded, the chances are still slim. Thinking of this, a hint of killing intent rose in Benjamin's heart. He's just a barbarian from the wilderness. After picking up the path of knights, he acts recklessly, treating the country's laws as nothing. He's really a wolf with wild ambitions. It's one thing if he submits to Otto's this time around. But if he doesn't, it's better for the 2 of us to join forces and get rid of him as soon as possible. Under him, Tyrant thought, Feng Xingjian asked me to teach Benjamin a lesson and get him to back out of the fight for the Great Western region completely. However, he doesn't allow me to kill him. At the thought of this, waves of greed rose up in his heart. Ever since he had eaten 2 divine-level experts consecutively, his desire to engulf the bodies of experts grew. Based on what Feng Qian had said, the Benjamin above him was at least a demigod with 3 tiers of perfection. This made him feel extremely thirsty. However, at the thought of the first prince, the current sect master of the ancient path of hell, the Abyss Lord, as well as the ruler of this country, the first prince's father, and 3 divine-level experts in a row, Tyrant suppressed the greed in his heart. Right now, both Feng Xingjian and I are in a period where our strength is increasing rapidly. With so much gold available, Feng Xingjian is also planning to announce the first 5 levels of the mystical prince to all of his subordinates. It's better not to offend the royal family for now. After a few months, when our strength increases tremendously, we'll have plenty of chances to eat them up. At the thought of this, Tyrant decided to act according to his original plan. Feng Xingjian didn't set any rules on how I can do anything to you. You can only blame your bad luck. At the thought of his plan, Tyrant felt proud. At the next moment, the chair changed, and a tentacle rose up from the surface of the chair, darting out toward Benjamin's body. However, both Benjamin and Asto were demigods with 3 tiers of perfection, so their reactions were extremely fast. Almost at the same instant that Tyrant changed, Benjamin had already dashed out into midair. With a loud boom, the entire luxurious mansion's roof was lifted off, and Benjamin dashed up to a height of over 100 meters. However, he was still one step too slow. It was because Tyrant had not simply darted into his body. Instead, he had started to seep through the cells. Sensing the changes in the cells in his body, Benjamin instantly condensed his martial will and dashed out toward the flesh and blood that tyrant had taken over. There seemed to be an intense collision, sound ringing out in void space, and Tyrant let out an agonizing cry. What a terrifying will! This old guy didn't rely on any fortuitous encounters or heavenly and earthly treasures. He relied on himself to train up step by step. With just this one collision, 30% of the flesh and blood that Tyrant had taken over was lost. Although he had trained his martial will well, he was still a mage after all, and a battle of wills was still not his forte. Benjamin let out a cold snort. Just as he was about to continue to attack with his will, his countenance suddenly changed. Although my will is far from yours, you're too indecisive and too conservative. If you had given up on this part of your body that I've taken over from the very beginning, or if you had decided to go all out from the very beginning and change the battlefield, you might still be able to make it in time. But it's too late now. As he spoke, Tyrant, who had taken over a part of the stomach wall, made his move. With this move, he instantly opened up the gates of the netherworld, and the things inside gushed wildly into Benjamin's stomach. Simultaneously, the auras of 1,440 specialty seeds soared up, and Benjamin's physical attributes, which had engulfed the bodies of 2 divine-level experts, were unleashed, temporarily stopping Benjamin's actions. When Benjamin sensed the things that had been gushed into his stomach, his eyes spewed out flames, and he felt as if he was about to go crazy. The things that Tyrant had poured into Benjamin's stomach were clearly feces. To think that Tyrant had poured out the gold in the gates of the netherworld in exchange for feces. Right now, the feces, which were 100 meters tall, 100 meters wide, and 100 meters long, filled up the entire gates of the netherworld, gushed into Benjamin's stomach. Benjamin felt as if he was about to go crazy. To think that there would be someone who would use a dimensional storage divine weapon to store such things, and even use them to attack? Was this guy a fool? For some reason, although Benjamin was furious, he could not help but think, if this guy uses a dimensional storage divine weapon like this, will he still dare to store things in the future? Chapter 528. Benjamin crazily stirred up his internal organs, trying to suppress the rice in his stomach. However, very soon, he felt that he could no longer suppress it. Anything, even if it was rice, would have a terrifying, expanding force if it were to suppress him from 100 meters wide, 100 meters tall, and 100 meters long to the size of a palm. It would be like a compressed air bomb. Benjamin had not expected that Feng Xingjian's determination to store rice and the size of his dimensional storage equipment would be so maniacal. Of course, such a compressed bomb would not be able to destroy Benjamin's body, which had attained perfection in its toughness. However, it was enough to shoot out from the only exit while he and Tyrant were engaged in a physical battle. Bang! A stream of yellow light soared into the sky and shot out from Benjamin's mouth. Then, like a flash flood, the huge yellow tide sprayed out like a fountain. It rained heavily 100 meters in the sky above the great western region, instantly engulfing the entire mansion. Amidst his furious bellows, a glaring flame burst out from Benjamin's body. A high temperature of several 100,000 degrees Celsius instantly enveloped his body, and a glaring light enveloped the entire sky. He chose to self-destruct his body, incinerating all the filth in the sky. Amidst the piercing flames, his body was reconstructed very quickly. Many bones, nerves, blood vessels, and muscles were regenerated at a rapid speed. He landed on the ground, his eyes filled with killing intent. Who is it? I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. He lowered his head abruptly and looked at the mansion, which had been engulfed in flames. He bellowed, "All of you scram." He almost wanted to immediately destroy the evidence of his crime and burn down the entire mansion and all the filth in it. However, when he thought of his subordinates and servants who were still inside, he could only force himself to stop. After waiting for a total of 3 minutes, all the conferred knights, knights and knight apprentices came out. Benjamin let out a furious bellow and abruptly raised up a huge fireball with a diameter of over 100 meters. The crimson fireball was like a sun as he smashed it toward the ground. In the blink of an eye, the entire mansion, along with the ground which was over 10 meters deep below it, completely evaporated. However, while physical objects could be burned, that unforgettable stench would not dissipate so easily. This was especially so under the high temperature. An extremely pungent stench was instantly emitted, covering almost half of the great western city. On this day, countless people in the great western city were so suffocated that they could no longer eat. At this moment, the words "great humiliation" kept on bellowing in Benjamin's heart. He even felt that if he did not resolve this matter, he would probably be unhappy for the rest of his life. There would always be a knot in his heart, and even the circulation of his martial will would become obscure. You're going too far. You're going too far. Nehaman landed on the ground, and with a boom, the ground within a radius of 100 meters cracked. It was clear to see how angry he was. He bellowed furiously, "Go find out. Go find out immediately. Find out who possesses the level of brain regeneration and a spatial god tool that is over 100 meters in length, width, and height." As he spoke, he walked towards one of his subordinates, only to see the subordinate subconsciously take a step back. Nehaman's eyes were bloodshot as he watched the man retreat. He roared furiously, "Why are you retreating? And what's with that look? Do you think I'm dirty?" "No, I didn't." With a bang, Nehaman struck out with his palm. Although Nehaman had already tried his best to control himself, that subordinate was still sent flying several hundred meters away. His bones were all shattered, his internal organs ruptured, and he was on the verge of death. 1 kilometer away, countless pieces of gray flesh slowly gathered together, once again forming Tyron's physical body. He smiled and said, "What an explosive temper. Thankfully, I'm also able to regenerate my physical body." Although Tyron had yet to reach the level of a knight's will, which allowed him to regenerate his brain, he could still make use of the gray-robed black magic to regenerate his physical body. When he had first met and fought with Fang Xingjian, he had already regenerated his physical body. He could even turn himself into a bracelet made of flesh, let alone regenerating his brain. However, at the thought of Nehaman's furious face, Tyron grinned. Ordinary people might not be able to react to what happened earlier, but over half of the conferred knights in the city should have been able to see it. Moreover, everyone could smell the stench. Let's see if you still have the face to continue commanding the great western region. If you can even put up with this, then I'll try another method. Fang Xingjian returned to the training room in the sacred land in a relaxed manner. He saw that Fang Xingjian, Fang Qian, Lilia, Zhou Xingwen, Anderson, as well as Ferdinand and Anthony, who were in charge of doing business and gathering materials, as well as Governor Devitt, head of department James, and the others who had recently been dealt a severe blow by the first prince's influence, were all present. Fang Xingjian asked, "How's it going?" Tyron shrugged and said, "Hee, they probably won't come looking for trouble for us for now." However, the others' minds are no longer on Tyrant. Right now, everyone's gazes were stimulated by the gold bars which almost filled up the entire training room. These were all released from the gates of the netherworld by Tyrant before he left. Ferdinand's eyes gleamed as he stared at these gold bars and shouted, "Xingjian, where did you get so many gold bars from?" Fang Xingjian shook his head, not planning to say. He merely asked, "During the time I was in seclusion, the situation didn't seem to be too good." James sighed and explained the current situation to Governor Devitt. Although they had heard some of it from Fang Qian was after all not the person involved. She probably did not know much of the top secret information. Ever since the first prince came out from seclusion, not only had the entire country undergone a change in leadership, he had also continued to increase his authority. He had even brought along the strongest subordinates under him, the Dark Knight, to take charge of the Xingwu region. The Xingwu region was basically the one with the weakest governance amongst the Empire's 8 regions. It was because the Xingwu region had 2 factions, the Myriad Stars Palace and the full moon shrine. The myriad stars palace's palace lord, the astral ancestor, and the full moon shrine's leader, the blue sacred moonlight, were both among the Empire's 10 great divine-level experts. It could be said that in the Xingwu region, even the government had to submit to the orders of these two great factions. The words of the astral ancestor or the blue sacred moonlight were more effective than anyone else. This time around, after the first prince came out from seclusion, he had dispersed his subordinates and had a change in leadership across the entire country. At the same time, he had changed the system of the regional academy and the governor, centralizing the central government's authority and upgrading the military's equipment. He had also personally taken charge of the Xingwu region, sending out a signal that he was going to take in all the factions in the entire country. The government and the people would become one, and there would be no more wild nights. His first target was the Xingwu region's 2 great divine-level factions. This series of reforms was so great that everyone was dazzled and gasped in amazement. How is this possible? Fang Qian was the first to say in disbelief, "The government and the people will become one, and there will be no more wild nights and no more factions that are not under his control." He wants to be both the emperor and the martial arts world's alliance chief. How is this possible? Amongst the Empire's 10 great experts, the myriad stars palace's astral ancestor, the 8 directional crimson dragon's undying Xia, the full moon shrine's blue sacred moonlight, and the great river alliance's fist emperor. All of them were people from various religions, factions, and dojos. How is it possible for him to suppress all of them? Also, the holy orison is from the holy sea of truth. The first prince's faction is from the school of sword arts, and the previous supreme chief, sword slayer of the secular world, was also one of the 10 great divine-level experts. How is it possible? Head of department James shook his head and said, "Sword slayer of the secular world has already joined the royal family and will be conferred the title of prince by His Majesty." The news that the School of Sword Arts will be integrated into the Imperial Academy system is still top secret at the moment, but it will probably spread throughout the world within a week. Hearing this earth-shattering news, everyone present felt giddy. Zhou Xingwen mumbled, "What a great move. This is really a great move. Once the first prince really manages to do it, all the key positions, conferred knights, and divine-level experts in 8 great regions will be in his hands. The central government will have an extremely high level of centralization, and no one will disobey the government's orders. The royal family will also gather all the world's resources. That will be an unprecedented period of prosperity since the founding of the country. His status and reputation will also reach an unprecedented level." Just then, Fang Xingjian asked, "Where's the second prince? Where did he go?" Chapter 529. Ever since the world's metamorphosis 3 months ago, His Highness has been training in seclusion, Head of Department James said with a sigh. Head of Department James sighed and said, "He has retracted all of his doppelgangers. Even we can't contact him now." Fang Xingjian nodded in understanding. The second prince was going to go all out to strive for the divine level. However, it was also because he was going all out that countless of his subordinates had lost contact with him. Faced with the first prince's pressure, they were naturally unable to hold on. This was why the great western region had been taken over so quickly. However, Fang Xingjian still had a doubt. The second prince should also have 10 levels of mystical prince. Even if his aptitude was not as good as his, it would definitely far surpass that of the first prince. Why had he not attained the divine level yet? Suppressing this doubt in his heart, Fang Xingjian continued to ask, "Robert, how's the gathering of materials coming along? We're still lacking a lot of heavenly and earthly treasures for specialty seeds. However, for the 3 sets of materials for the mystical prince, the 8th and 9th levels have been gathered. Only the 10th level is still lacking." Fang Xingjian nodded in satisfaction. "Give me the materials for the 8th and 9th levels first. You can take out all the gold bars here and do your best to purchase the materials." Ferdinand said, "We're already doing it. However, with the world's metamorphosis, the rate at which everyone is improving is getting increasingly obvious. In the future, the competition for materials will also become increasingly intense. It's fine. From today onwards, I'll give you guys the 4th and 5th level of mystical prints. I'll pay for all the materials. You guys can use the 5th level of mystical prints to cultivate. From the very beginning, Head of Department James and Governor Devitt were both puzzled about the content of the mystical prints. Therefore, Zhou Xingwen pulled the two of them to the side and slowly explained. Right now, Fang Xingjian was very powerful. His 5 god-slaying swords were indestructible, and he was almost invincible among those below the divine level. If he were to activate the Heaven's Volition Sword intent, he would be able to put up a fight against Magic Prince warriors and mages. He should also be able to put up a fight against divine-level experts who are on the path of knights. Therefore, he was not afraid of using the mystical prints to increase the abilities of his subordinates. Fang Xingjian then asked, Anthony, how are the preparations for the forging of the divine remains equipment? Anthony said, the Wang clan is making preparations and has already sent a team to the academy. However, the young miss of the Wang clan, who is in charge of the preparations, returned to the Eastern Sand region 7 days ago. It seems that she has some matters to attend to. It's fine. Inform me immediately when she returns. I'll give them the divine bone and let them start forging the divine armament. Following Fang Xingjian's instructions, everyone present once again got busy. Next, all of them would receive the boost from the 5th level of the mystical prince and become geniuses amongst geniuses. Fang Xingjian was also very curious as to how far people like Head of Department James and Governor Devitt, who were genius experts to begin with, will be able to reach after being reinforced by the mystical prince. As for Fang Xingjian, he started his cultivation for the 9th and 10th levels of the mystical prince. After 2 days and 2 nights, Fang Xingjian's entire body was covered in countless flickering fluorescent prints. These prints exuded hints of mysterious auras and were crazily absorbing the ether particles in the air. Fang Xingjian felt an endless stream of information surging into his mind. In an instant, many memories of a person were born in his mind, and then consciousness was born. This was the first time Fang Xingjian had encountered such a situation. In the past, even if he had absorbed other people's personal information, he would only be able to gather some memory fragments and some martial arts experiences. Other conferred knights did not have the boost from the mystical prince. Even if they needed to absorb personal information to give birth to a simple consciousness, they would not be able to do it as quickly as Fang Xingjian had done. After they received some memory fragments, they would absorb a portion that was useful and crush the rest that was useless. Therefore, it was very difficult for them to form a personality. Fang Xingjian assessed the consciousness in his mind curiously. At the next moment, that consciousness turned into a berserker in red armor and bellowed furiously in Fang Xingjian's consciousness. It's me, Mencius, the world's greatest warrior. Looking at Fang Xingjian, Mencius bellowed furiously. Who are you? Why are you in my mind? You've just been born. Is your mind still a little muddled? Fang Xingjian let out a cold laugh, and his martial will gushed out. In the blink of an eye, Mencius was already in a state of disarray. Mencius let out a series of agonizing cries, and in the blink of an eye, he started to beg for mercy. There was no trace of his earlier unrivaled aura. Spare me. Spare me. I beg you, spare me. What do you want to know? I'll definitely tell you everything I know. Fang Xingjian smiled. Who on earth are you? My name is Mencius, the world's greatest warrior. With a boom, Mencius was crushed by a sword attack. Amidst agonizing cries, he managed to regain his original appearance after much difficulty, but it was already half of his original size. Seeing that Fang Xingjian was still going to attack, Mencius shouted loudly, I'll speak, I'll speak. It's true that my name is Mencius, and I'm a teacher in the Great Western Region Regional Academy. It was only after a series of exchanges that Fang Xingjian found out that Mencius should have been a level 29 expert 50 years ago. It was a pity that he had died when he was striving for brain regeneration. It's useless. Fang Xingjian looked at Mencius, and killing intent flashed in his eyes. Wait a minute. Wait a minute, Mencius said nervously. Don't kill me. I'm useful. What are you useful for? Fang Xingjian asked. Mencius said, I'm a teacher in the regional academy. I know countless manuals and martial techniques. I can guide you in your cultivation. With a bang, Mencius was crushed once again. After a few more attacks, Mencius' consciousness was completely shattered. During this process, Fang Xingjian went through Mencius' memories. However, Mencius only had a portion of the information, and his memories were not complete. Moreover, Mencius' realm was only that of an ordinary level 29 conferred knight. To Fang Xingjian, there was really no reference value. Fang Xingjian shook his head and continued to try cultivating. However, he discovered that the 9th level of the mystical prince, coupled with the current ether particle density, was far too powerful. Almost every few minutes to tens of minutes, a new consciousness would be born in his mind. He used his martial will to destroy these people's wills. Each time he did so, he could sense that his martial will seemed to become a little more resilient. As for their memories, most of them were useless. A small portion of them were used by him to enrich his sword arts. In the repeated collisions with other people's wills, Fang Xingjian's will seemed to become increasingly crystalline, transparent, and sturdy. After a night passed, Fang Xingjian felt that his will had clearly improved. The 8th and 9th level of the mystical prince are also of great help to the cultivation of my martial will. I wonder what effects the 10th level of the mystical prince will have. Just then, Robert, who was in charge of forging divine weapons, rushed over to pay a visit to Fang Xingjian. Sir, there seems to be some problems with the Wang clan's young Mississippi. In Fang Xingjian's mind, an old man shouted, "Ha ha! Hand over your body to me. I'll let your name go down in history." Amidst the intense collisions, the old man's consciousness was completely shattered. Fang Xingjian felt that his martial will and sword intents seemed to have become sharper. He opened his eyes, looked at Anthony and the maid behind him, and asked, "What's going on?" The maid dropped to her knees and cried out, "Sir, you must save our young Mississippi." After she returned to the main clan in the Eastern Sand region, she was placed under house arrest by the 2 young masters. They wanted her to hand over the clan's treasure and step down from the position of clan head. Chapter 530. The Wang clan's young miss is under house arrest. Fang Xingjian raised his brows and said, "Based on what I know, your clan's young miss, Wang Xiaoyan, was personally conferred the position of clan head by the previous clan head, right? Moreover, she has been in charge of the clan for over a year and is a level 29 expert, who would be able to put her under house arrest and deprive her of the position of clan head. As long as there are enough benefits, what can't one do?" That maid smiled bitterly and said, "The young Mrs. elder brother and younger brother are both profligate sons who are just waiting to die. They have great ambitions, but little talent. They don't care about the young Miss's good points at all, and instead think about replacing the young Miss as the clan head every day. But the position of clan head is something they can take on. With their extravagance and dissipation, they'll probably squander everything in the clan within a year." "All right, get to the point," Robert reminded him. "I'm sorry. Those 2B asterisk stars are too detestable," the maid nodded. The 2 of them contacted outsiders this time around and exposed the Wang clan's greatest secret, inviting a wolf into the house. "The Wang clan's greatest secret?" Robert asked curiously. As a top-notch blacksmith clan, the Wang clan has forged countless divine weapons and even divine remains equipment before. What other secrets do they have? Who have they attracted? The first prince has sent the strongest dark knight under him, and the 5th prince has personally come to support the eldest young master and the 3rd young master respectively, the maid said with a sigh. Fang Xingjian's gaze narrowed. The first prince was striving to attain the divine level and had set up his plans across the entire empire. There is no need to say much about the number of experts under him. The 5th prince was also known as a genius. It was said that he was progressing rapidly in his fist arts and seemed to be catching up. To think that he had set his sights on the Wang clan? Robert asked curiously, to think that it could attract the attention of the first prince and the fifth prince. What secret is it? And what secret is it that even a maid like you knows about it? I'm the young Mrs. Personal Maid. Although I'm just a maid, we're as close as sisters. And the two of you, please don't tell anyone about our conversation today. Otherwise, the world might be in turmoil again, the maid said with a grim countenance. The maid said with a grim countenance. The Wong clan has been established in the Eastern Sand region for close to 100 years and has always been famous for their forging. However, no one knows that the Wong clan isn't just an ordinary forging clan. They're also a royal clan that escaped from the Western Lands Mountainous Sea dynasty. Hearing the maid's words, both Fong Xinjian and Robert revealed astonished expressions. The maidservant continued, 100 years ago, there were flames of war everywhere in the Western Land, and there were rebel armies everywhere. Just as the Mountainous Sea dynasty was about to be overthrown, the emperor of that time chose two of the most outstanding princes to flee to the east and west. The prince who left toward the east came to the empire and the Eastern Sand region. He once again reproduced and became the Wong clan of today. A hint of surprise flashed in both Fong, Xinjian, and Robert's eyes. They did not expect the Wong clan to have such a great background. To think that they were the royal family's widow from one of the last dynasties in the Western continent. Robert asked, "It seems that when you came over, you also brought along the Mountainous Sea dynasty's treasures, which the two princes have taken a liking to." The maid smiled bitterly and shook her head, saying, "That's right. The two princes who escaped back, then each brought along two of the Mountainous Sea dynasty's treasures. One of them is the legendary Heavenly Emperor's book, which contains the 10 great martial arts of the Heavenly Dao Palace. The other one is the Panwu Heavenly Raiment, which the Mountainous Sea dynasty spent 50 years gathering countless rare treasures in the world to forge for the emperor. It has the power to split the seas and unify the world." Robert smiled and said, "This Panwu Heavenly Raiment is said to be able to split the seas and unify the world. But in the end, the Mountainous Sea dynasty was still annihilated. That's because no one was able to put on the Panwu Heavenly Raiment back then. It's not that the Panwu Heavenly Raiment isn't powerful enough," the maid retorted. "It gathered the brilliant ideas of countless experts in the Mountainous Sea dynasty, and the wealth it expended was enough to build several thousand regional academies. There's no doubt about the power of the Panwu Heavenly Raiment." Robert waved his hand and asked, all right. Then it seems that the one you guys brought is that Panwu Heavenly Raiment?" The maid said, "It's true that we brought Panwu Tianyi. However, Panwu Tianyi is too powerful, and the prince back then did not have the ability to suppress or use the Panwu Heavenly Raiment. Therefore, in order to prevent the Panwu Heavenly Raiment from being exposed and bringing about a calamity, he hid the Panwu Heavenly Raiment, leaving behind only a treasure map that was passed down to each generation's clan head." Fong Xinjian nodded. Therefore, the first prince and the fifth prince set their sights on the Panwu Heavenly Raiment. That's right. The fifth prince's fist arts are too powerful, and the Dark Knight is the first prince's strongest subordinate. Right now, the only one who can save the young miss is you, Lord Fong Xinjian. Since the Wong clan forged a divine weapon for me, I'll naturally have to protect you guys. Fong Xinjian smiled. As for the Panwu Heavenly Raiment, I'm also very interested. 5 hours later, in the Eastern Sand region's Sunset Fortress. Although this fortress, which was close to the borders of the Eastern Sand region, was known as a fortress, it appeared to be about the same size as the Great Western City. It was because this was the only huge city one could pass through the desert before arriving at the Sand Country. Countless merchant groups, warriors, soldiers, and mercenaries had gathered here. The Wong clan was situated in a place where all sorts of people were mixed together. Right now, in the Wong clan's bedroom, the Wong clan's young miss, Wang Xiaoyan, was sitting before the dressing table. Looking at her fair skin, rosy lips, beautiful hair that cascaded down like a waterfall, and eyes that were like stars in the mirror, Wang Xiaoyan sighed. her face filled with worry. Just then, a maid knocked on the door and walked in. She looked at Wang Xiaoyan and said, "Young miss, let us help you with your makeup. The banquet will be starting soon. Scram! All of you scram! All of you come in." Looking at the servants fleeing, Wang Xiaoyan let out a bitter laugh. However, she understood that this would only be able to delay things for a few minutes. At the thought of this, she picked up her hair bun, planning to tie it up herself. Just then, a voice rang out behind her. "Do you need any help?" Wang Xiaoyan turned her head abruptly. She was also a level 29 second transition expert. With her heaven's perception scanning out, she saw that Fang Xingjian had unknowingly appeared behind her. Wang Xiaoyan said warily, "Who are you? Aren't you afraid of death for barging into our Wang clan?" Although Wang Xiaoyan had been to the great western city before, she had not had the chance to meet Fang Xingjian. Therefore, she did not recognize Fang Xingjian. Fang Xingjian said calmly, "Great Western region, Fang Xingjian, I'm here to help you." A hint of surprise flashed on Wang Xiaoyan's face. However, it disappeared in the blink of an eye, leaving behind only bitterness. "It's too late. You won't be able to help me." "Oh." Wang Xiaoyan let out a breath and said, "You still don't know, right? The victor between the Dark Knight and the Fifth Prince has already been decided. As expected, the Fifth Prince has hidden his abilities well. His talent and abilities have surpassed all of our imaginations. Even you aren't a match for him." A hint of playfulness flashed on Wang Xiaoyan's face as she looked at Fang Xingjian. She said, "The Dark Knight has already completed 4 tiers of perfection in his body's toughness, ether organs, brain regeneration, and specialty seeds. He's only a step away from the divine level. However, the Fifth Prince only used 17 moves from the beginning to the end to defeat him. Are you still going to help me?" After saying that, she looked at Fang Xingjian as if wanting to see Fang Xingjian's astonishment and distress. Chapter 531. However, Fang Xingjian's calmness caused Wang Xiaoyan to be a little disappointed. He nodded and said calmly, "The Dark Knight has attained 4 tiers of perfection. It's true that his abilities are world-shaking among those below the divine level. If I were to take care of him, I'd probably need 3 to 5 moves." Wang Xiaoyan's lips twitched, feeling that Fang Xingjian was a little too arrogant. She could not help but continue. "This time around, eldest brother has brought the Dark Knight, who represents the First Prince's influence, to fight with me for the position of clan head. Although the Dark Knight lost to the Fifth Prince, the First Prince has too many experts under him. Now that he has attained the divine level, the Fifth Prince probably won't be a match for him. Little brother has brought the Fifth Prince along. Putting aside the fact that the Fifth Prince's talent and abilities are astonishing, do you know that a few days ago, he became sworn brothers with the Fist Emperor of the Great River Alliance? The Great River Alliance is the leader of the underworld forces that control the 72 waterways from the north to the south of the empire. They are a top-notch faction in terms of wealth and influence, and their leader, the Fist Emperor, is a self-taught genius who has attained a breakthrough to the divine level, becoming one of the 10 divine level experts in the empire. There's also my uncle. Although he didn't stand out on his own accord and is the weakest among the 3 parties, he has just attained perfection in his body's toughness and reached the level of a demigod. This is my fault. I've been too focused on the clan's business over the past year and neglected my cultivation." Saying this, Wang Xiaoyan let out another sigh. She looked at Fang Xingjian and said, "Eldest brother, little brother, uncle, and I, if we were to really fight for the position of clan head, I would be the weakest. Even with your help, Fang Xingjian, I would only be slightly stronger than my uncle. There's no hope for me to go up against the First Prince and the Fifth Prince." Fang Xingjian frowned and said, "With me around, I'll naturally be able to help you lead the Wang clan. It'll be fine as long as you forge the divine remains equipment for me. It's true that your talent is very strong. If you're given a few more years, you might really be able to do it. But now," Wang Xiaoyan laughed, shook her head, and said, "I don't believe it. I don't believe that you can defeat the Fifth Prince, much less the First Prince. Have you forgotten that I've just returned from the Great Western region? If I was still looking forward to it before, then now I've thought it through. Your second prince's faction can't even protect yourselves, so why are you still helping me fight for the position of patriarch? This time, I'm asking you for help. I only hope that you can help me escape. I'll continue to forge divine weapons for you. Feng Xingjian said lightly, if I say that I want you to be the patriarch, then you must be the patriarch. No one can object. Wang Xiaoyan frowned and said, Feng Xingjian, I've already said that I've already given up on the position of Wang family patriarch. Feng Xingjian said coldly, do you still not understand? I've already said that no one is allowed to object, including you. If I say you're you, then you are. If I want you to sit on the patriarch seat, then only you can sit on it. Anyone else who tries will die. Wang Xiaoyan furrowed her brows and her chest heaved up and down. She was so angry that her face turned ugly. You lunatic. All right, you guys are going to hold a meeting to transfer the position of patriarch, right? I'll go with you. Wang Xiaoyan snorted in anger and punched out with her fist. Her fist was like a steel hammer smashing through the air. Amidst the whistling sounds, her fist brought about a violent gust of wind as it smashed towards Feng Xingjian. It was like a meteor crashing down, causing rumbling sounds to ring out in his ears. Just this explosion in the air was enough to kill an ordinary person. Seeing the beauty in front of him actually unleashing such a ferocious attack, Feng Xingjian's eyes flashed with a look of surprise. But what cultivation base did he have? His right hand slashed out like a blade, directly intercepting Wang Xiaoyan's fist. After that, with a twist of his palm, it was as though he had sliced through the air, forming a spiral of air currents. His palm was even a step ahead of Wang Xiaoyan's fist. Wang Xiaoyan struggled for a moment, only to discover that Feng Xingjian's fist was like a huge mountain, causing her fist to be unable to move at all. Woman, it's no longer up to you. Come with me. Feng Xingjian was clearly determined to get the Wang clan. Not only did this descendant of the Western dynasty possess the technology to forge divine remains equipment, but they also possessed the secret to the Panwu heavenly raiment. Moreover, as members of the royal family, their martial arts legacies would definitely have their own unique aspects. They might even have a way to strive for the divine level. How could Feng Xingjian possibly let go of this chance? Feng Xingjian's hand, which was holding on to Wang Xiaoyan's fist, trembled, and a faint wave spread through Wang Xiaoyan's entire body from her fist. It shook off all of Wang Xiaoyan's resistance, and with a flick of his right hand, Feng Xingjian grabbed onto Wang Xiaoyan's back. Circulating his sword force, Wang Xiaoyan could only walk out under his control. Right now, all of the Wang clan's upper echelon had arrived in the hall. The person in the main seat was a young man with a head full of golden hair. He was dressed in military robes and riding boots, appearing extremely arrogant. The man's head was raised up high, and he only used the corner of his eyes to glance at everyone in the hall. However, his eyes revealed blatant greed and desire, as if he wanted to take over everything in the world. It was the Empire's fifth prince. It was said that after encountering danger a few years ago, he had put in a lot of effort in his cultivation and had unrivaled talent. Behind the fifth prince was a young man with a gloomy expression. His eyes were closed, and the auras of specialty seeds on his body kept on rising and changing. It was obvious that he had been condensing specialty seeds all this while. He was the fifth prince's personal guard, White. Next to the fifth prince was a young man in his 20s. He was the Wang clan's second young master and Wang Xiaoyan's younger brother, Wang Fenghua. Slightly further away from them, the Dark Knight in black clothes and armor was seated on a chair. Next to him was a lady in purple clothes and hair. She was Li Zi, the top-notch expert who had been chased by the first prince on the snowy plains in the north back then. She had used the 4 seals of world creation to go up against the first prince's overturned hell. After the Dark Knight fell into a disadvantageous position, she had also been sent to provide support to the Dark Knight in the fight for the position of the Wang clan's clan head. Next to them was a middle-aged man in his 30s with a gloomy expression and curly hair. He was the Wang clan's eldest young master and Wang Xiaoyan's elder brother, Wang Xiujia. A little further away, the Wang clan's current top expert, Wang Xiaoyan's uncle, Wang Heshuan, sat quietly. As the Wang clan's strongest expert, he had always been one of the overlords of the entire Sunset Fortress. His reputation had spread far and wide, and after attaining one tier of perfection in his martial arts and becoming a demigod, he even had the ambition to take over the position of the Wang clan's clan head. Right now, the three of them were the three strongest influences in the fight for the position of the Wang clan's clan head. The many middle-aged and elderly people sitting behind them were the many members of the Wang clan's upper echelon. The Dark Knight stared at the young man next to the Wang clan's second young master, Wang Fenghua. When he saw the blatant greed in that young man's eyes, he frowned. In fact, the fifth prince bore some resemblance to the first prince in terms of appearance. He also seemed to have a little of the first prince's domineering aura. However, in the Dark Knight's opinion, if the first prince had the disposition of a king who wanted to dominate the world and unify the world, then the aura of this fifth prince was more like an evil demonic aura that wanted to engulf the world and take over all the beautiful things in the world. Thinking of the fist technique the fifth prince displayed, the Dark Knight frowned even more. Even if Li Zi were to rush over and join forces with the Dark Knight, he still did not have the confidence to win against the other party. It was a pity that the first prince was making arrangements in the world, and the experts were scattered everywhere. There were not that many people who could rush over to help him. Seeing that the Dark Knight was looking over, the fifth prince laughed and said, "Dark Knight, Wang Heshuan, this time around, the two of you are the only ones vying with me for the position of the Wang clan's clan head. As for the others, they're all mediocre and useless. There's no need to mention them." With that, the fifth prince sat up straight, and the smile on his face gradually disappeared. A vicious, and possessive aura gushed forth, as if he wanted to engulf everyone present in one gulp. There was also an imposing aura, as if he was a noisy guest who would usurp the host position. He then said in a playful tone, "Today, let's have a good talk about who the position of the clan head belongs to. It just so happens that everyone is here. Let's just settle it like this, saving us the trouble of fighting and ruining the Wang clan's assets." Chapter 532. Hearing the fifth prince's words, the Dark Knight smiled coldly and said, "It's not just the three of us who are vying for the position of the Wang clan's clan leader. Has your highness set your sights on the Wang clan's eldest young mistress, Wang Xiaoyan? This girl was recruited by Fang Xinjian to forge a divine weapon, so she must have a backer behind her." "Are you talking about Fang Xinjian?" The fifth prince smiled and said, "It's just a brat from the wilderness. Big brother has always been reluctant to make a move. Could it be that you want me, the younger brother, to make a move? In that case, why don't you let big brother step down completely and leave the Xingwu province's affairs to me? Suppressing all the sects in the world, the government and the people as one, isn't something that just anyone can do." Just then, the Wang clan's eldest young master, Wang Xiujia, who was next to the Dark Knight, said, "The fifth prince is really arrogant. From what I know, the second prince has great talent and bold vision, while the fourth prince has become a disciple of the church and is even more unfathomable. Although the third prince never leaves his residence, it's said that he has long become a demigod and has improved by leaps and bounds over the years. His cultivation is probably above that of your highness. Although your highness's talent is astonishing, you rose to prominence too late. I'm afraid it won't be easy for you to achieve anything in the future, right? Humph, my talent is not something you can understand." The fifth prince smiled and said, "It's just a matter of time before I attain the divine level and become the world's top expert. In the entire world, who can compare to me in terms of talent?" That's not necessarily true. The Wang clan's top expert, Wang Heshuan, also said, now that the first prince has attained the divine level, the second prince has also gone into seclusion to strive for the divine level. A few months ago, Fang Xinjian created the rebirth sword technique and became a demigod in less than 2 years of cultivation. In the National Academy, there was also Dongfang Ling, who had gotten first place in the national selection at the age of 14. It was said that the Northern Ice region's Rellings had also reached 2 tiers of perfection. Their talents were probably not inferior to Her Highness. Moreover, if His Highness really controls the Wang clan, I fear that the entire Wang clan will have to face the first prince's thunderous rage. Fang Xingjian, Dongfang Ling, sooner or later, I will compete with them and ruthlessly trample on their self-esteem. I will let them know what a true genius is. The fifth prince's gaze turned cold as he looked at Wang Heshuan and said slowly, "As for today, do you really think that I don't have any trump cards? My talent and luck aren't something you can imagine. Today, I'll show you why I have the confidence to fight against Big Brother." As Fang Xingjian spoke, a phantom image slowly appeared behind the fifth prince. It was as if space had shattered and he had darted out from space. It was a strange beast that looked like a lion or a tiger. The beast had 4 eyes on its forehead, and in each eye socket was a jade-green eyeball. They were filled with innocence, kindness, and curiosity, just like a newborn baby. The beast had 2 small wings on its back. It looked weak and powerless, as if it couldn't fly at all. When the wild beast first appeared, everyone was slightly stunned. However, at the next moment, the Dark Knight stood up abruptly. His eyes were filled with disbelief as he stared at the wild beast and said, This is the 4-eyed heavenly winged beast, the cub of the primordial divine beast, the 4-eyed heavenly winged beast? How is that possible? These divine-level ferocious beasts should have gone extinct a long time ago. But they haven't gone extinct. The fifth prince stroked the 4-eyed heavenly winged beast's neck and said with a smile, "This is a stray dog that I adopted when I was young. It's only after he's grown up that I realized that he's the cub of the 4-eyed heavenly winged beast. Right now, his physical body has already surpassed that of a demigod with 4 tiers of perfection. He even has the ability to materialize his will, which is equivalent to having half a step into the divine level. When he really grows up, he'll be a genuine divine-level ferocious beast. His physical strength and terrifying physical body will be something that even divine-level experts can't compare to." After saying this, the fifth prince's gaze turned cold as he looked at everyone's dumbfounded expressions. He stared at the Wang clan's #1 expert, Wang Heshuan, and said, "Although you're the Wang clan's #1 expert, for daring to be disrespectful to me, I'll give you a small punishment today to let you know the prestige of the royal family." Shall he do it? The countenance of the 4-eyed heavenly winged beast behind the fifth prince changed, and its innocent face was suddenly filled with killing intent as it looked toward Wang Heshuan. Wang Heshuan let out a long bellow, and the auras from the several hundred specialty seeds all over his body rose up. In that instant, countless physical particles exploded, and his aura surged. His many muscles and tendons moved like many whips lashing out at the air, releasing a series of crackling sounds. However, he had just let out a long bellow when the 4-eyed heavenly winged beast's gaze narrowed, and a transparent martial will exploded on Wang Heshuan's body. How terrifying was the power of the cub of a divine-level ferocious beast. The explosion caused Wang Heshuan to let out an agonizing howl and spurt out fresh blood. Blood splattered all over his body. Then, with a flash, the 4-eyed heavenly winged beast's claw grabbed out toward Wang Heshuan, bringing along a strong gust of wind. Wang Heshuan let out an enraged bellow, put his palms together, and raised them up high. Like an indestructible great hammer, he descended from the skies and smashed down toward the 4-eyed heavenly winged beast. As the hammer came down, the gravity on the 4-eyed heavenly winged beast increased by over 10 times. The ground under its feet cracked and shattered. This was the Wang clan's ultimate technique, the Mountainous Seed Dynasty's ultimate technique, Mountain Shaking Palm. However, this powerful attack, which could distort gravity and destroy a stretch of steel city walls, struck the 4-eyed heavenly winged beast's body. However, The four-eyed, heavenly winged beast's physical body was extremely close to the divine level and was far too powerful. The mountain's shaking palm only caused its body to pause for a moment. Then it continued to charge forward, grabbing onto Wang Hushuan's head and smashing its entire body onto Wang Hushuan's body. With a loud rumble, Wang Hushuan spurted out a large mouthful of blood. All the muscles and bones throughout his body had turned into mush. If not for the fact that he had attained perfection in his body's toughness, he would have been smashed into splatters of blood. Looking at the four-eyed, heavenly winged beast that had subdued Wang Hushuan with a single move, everyone stood up in astonishment. A divine beast. To think that it's really a divine-level, ferocious beast. How is it possible for someone to subdue a divine-level, ferocious beast? Although it's not really at the divine level yet, it's already extremely close to it. It even has the ability to materialize its will. What kind of luck does this fifth prince have? Everyone looked at the four-eyed, heavenly winged beast, their gazes filled with blatant greed, jealousy, and fear. The fifth prince half reclined on a chair and said leisurely, "How is it? With the four-eyed, heavenly winged beast around, even if eldest brother were to come personally, I'd still be able to fight him. Second brother, third brother, and fourth brother are no match for me. As for those geniuses like Fang Xingjian and Dongfang Ling, they'll just be my subjects in the future. There's nothing that I can't get if I want to get it." As if it was playing along with the fifth prince's words, the four-eyed, heavenly winged beast pressed Wang Hushuan's head onto the ground and let out a series of furious bellows. However, just as everyone was feeling intimidated and uneasy, two figures walked into the hall. To think that it's the young of a divine-level ferocious beast. Not bad, not bad. It just so happens that I want to forge a divine remains equipment, and the more materials I have, the better. This four-eyed, heavenly winged beast shall become the nutrients for my divine remains equipment. The excess flesh can also be used to cook. I've never eaten the flesh of a divine-level ferocious beast before. Wherever Fang Xingjian passed by with Wang Xiaoyan, the crowd would be parted by the pressure from their sword intents. The two of them appeared before the four-eyed, heavenly winged beast. Chapter 533. When the four-eyed, heavenly winged beast saw Fang Xingjian, it let out a bellow, its eyes filled with hostility. As the cub of a divine-level ferocious beast, it had extraordinary intelligence and could understand human speech. It could also hear Fang Xingjian wanting to pull out its tendons, pull out its bones, and turn it into a divine weapon or a dish. When the Dark Knight saw Fang Xingjian's appearance, his eyes narrowed, and a hint of interest flashed on his face. The fifth prince, who was seated in the host's seat, threw a cold glance toward Fang Xingjian and said calmly, "And who are you? Who allowed you to come here and speak?" He looked at Wang Xiaoyan, who was in Fang Xingjian's arms, and said, "Young Miss Wang, is this your friend? I wonder what kind of madness has gotten into him for him to dare to spout nonsense here." Wang Xiaoyan's entire body was under Fang Xingjian's control, so how could she speak? Fang Xingjian smiled and said, "It doesn't matter who I am. It's just that the reason I've come this time around is to help young Miss Wang reorganize the clan and stabilize your position as the Wang clan's clan head. Be it the fifth prince or the first prince, just go wherever you're supposed to go. There's no need for you to bother with the matters here." Ha ha! The fifth prince laughed out loud, looking at Fang Xingjian as if he was looking at an idiot. "Good, very good. How long has it been since someone has dared to speak to me like this? But if you're done speaking, then you can go and die. To be so impudent before me and then be killed, it'll be enough for you to leave your name in the annals of history. You can use this as a lesson to the future generations. You can tell them that not everything can be spouted." White, as the fifth prince let out a cold snort, a young man standing behind him opened his eyes. The young man was exuding an eerie, cold aura, as if he was a dead person. The moment he opened his eyes, the entire hall seemed to have lit up. Everyone felt a sense of trepidation. What a powerful killing intent. How many people has this guy killed? At the next moment, with a flash, The young man unsheathed the dagger at his waist and darted to Fang Xingzhan's side like a venomous snake. A gloomy, mysterious, and vicious aura gushed forth, and the dagger brought along a series of afterimages as it circled around Fang Xingzhan's vitals, stabbing down. The moment this young man made his move, auras from 800 specialty seeds burst forth from his body. The instant eruption of his physical body was enough to cause the air to explode and tear the ground apart. The killing intent from his attacks was as if it was material. This was the truth. This young man by the name of White had been the Fifth Prince's bodyguard since he was young and had always been protecting the Fifth Prince. He had also received countless pointers from the Fifth Prince and had taken various heavenly and earthly treasures from the royal family. He had already reached level 29 and had been condensing specialty seeds day and night, striving to attain the first tier of perfection. He could be said to be the Fifth Prince's most trusted personal guard, and he had helped the Fifth Prince get rid of countless opponents in secret. With this attack, Fang Xingzhan's killing intent soared into the sky. Ordinary conferred knights would probably be stunned by this killing intent. In fact, in the past, he had once launched a sneak attack on a conferred knight in the dark. Fang Xingzhan's killing intent had gushed forth, and the other party had not been able to react in time before Fang Xingzhan had used his dagger to stab the conferred knight's vitals. A tremendous force had erupted, and with a bang, the conferred knight had been turned into a pile of dismembered corpses. However, he was not facing an ordinary person. Instead, he was facing Fang Xingzhan, who had attained great mastery in sword arts, condensed sword intent, and perfected his body and physical particles. Fang Xingzhan did not even bother to look at White, who was dashing towards him. He simply threw out a punch. It was as if a giant dragon was roaring in the air, and the air seemed to condense into a solid substance. Before the punch could hit White, the roof of the entire house had already been blown away. With just a single punch, coupled with the atmosphere that overturned the roof, there was a state of overturning the world and encompassing the four extremities. This was still not the sword technique that Fang Xingzhan was most proficient in. It showed how deep and unfathomable his martial arts were right now. Fang Xingzhan neither blocked nor dodged, allowing White's dagger to pierce into his arm. Fang Xingzhan's fist and arm swept across White's chest, and the latter smashed into the ground with a bang, creating a huge crater. A terrifying fist force had completely shattered his chest, and he spat out a large mouthful of blood. His chest slowly regenerated, and he was temporarily unable to move. Fang Xingzhan then took a step forward, wanting to crush White's head and kill this death warrior completely. This is bad. Almost at the moment when Fang Xingzhan made his move, the Fifth Prince had already cried out in alarm. He had not expected that he would encounter a great expert so casually. However, Fang Xingzhan's attack was far too fast. By the time the Fifth Prince reacted, Fang Xingzhan's fist had already smashed down on White's body with the force of Mount Tai. White's chest was crushed, and then Fang Xingzhan was about to crush White's head with a stomp. The Fifth Prince's body trembled, and he was already in midair. With a tap of his feet, he had already blocked Fang Xingzhan's path of descent. The tip of his feet was like a long blade, moving about and cutting through the air, releasing swoosh-swoosh sounds. As an expert who had attained 4 tiers of perfection in his body's toughness, specialty seeds, ether organs, and brain regeneration, each of the Fifth Prince's attacks were like slashes from a superior divine weapon. Moreover, this kick of his was the ancient path of Hell's Saber Mountain stance. It was like a mountain of blades and a sea of fire, causing one to suffer great torment. With a single kick, there were several hundred layers of forces, and even ordinary superior divine weapons would be slashed apart. As long as Fang Xingzhan's leg continued to descend, the tip of the Fifth Prince's foot would slash apart his leg. Then, under the Fifth Prince's astonished gaze, Fang Xingzhan's descending foot accelerated once again. With a loud boom, it stomped down on White's head, causing it to explode like a watermelon, turning into red and white splatters on the ground. The fifth prince's saber mountain stance tapped on Feng Xingjian's leg. However, electricity flashed on Feng Xingjian's leg, and the heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces surged to their limits, forcefully blocking this kick. The two of them separated immediately upon contact, each taking 3 steps back. However, White's head had been crushed, and there was no way he could survive. The Dark Knight laughed and said, "Feng Xingjian, when we met 1 year ago in the regional academy, you were still like an ant. To think that you've already grown to such a level. When I heard that the Supreme Chief, Hung Tianxiao, was defeated by you, I thought that it was because he was careless and that you had some divine weapon. However, by the looks of it now, you've truly cultivated to the top in the world." Feng Xingjian threw a cold glance at the Dark Knight and said, "I'll settle the matter between me and the first prince with you later." He turned to look at the fifth prince and said calmly, "Since this death warrior dared to launch a sneak attack on me, I'll naturally kill him on the spot. As for you, on account that you're the second prince's younger brother, I won't pursue the matter of you launching a sneak attack. Leave this divine-level ferocious beast behind, and you can leave." When the fifth prince heard Feng Xingjian's words and saw White's headless corpse on the ground, his eyes turned bloodshot, and his heart was filled with rage. When had he ever met someone who dared to be so arrogant before him? Moreover, he had grown up with White. Although they were guards in name, they were actually as close as brothers. Now that Feng Xingjian had crushed White's head with a single stomp, it was as if the fifth prince had been slapped several hundred times. "Feng Xingjian!" The fifth prince gritted his teeth and spat out Feng Xingjian's name. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was like a black bear that had gone mad. "You're dead. You're not the only one who's dead. To think that you dared to kill my brother. No one can remain unscathed after killing my brother. You'll die, and everyone related to you will die as well. I'll break their limbs one by one, dig out their eyes, and torture them to death." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.